Hello, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Thursday, July 9th, and welcome to the show. Hope you're all doing well. You know, our big news this week was the launch of what we call Digital Anarchist 2.0. It's really just it's more than just a new interface. We really kind of put together what was our original vision of what Digital Anarchist was going to be. And, you know, it's great. We have over 1,400 videos on there, over 1,000 different guests. They're all the videos are indexed by guests and subject, and they're all available for free to watch and play and stream over the internet via your computer, your phone, your TV, or what have you. So really, if you get a chance, go check out digitalanarchist.com and see what we're talking about. But, you know, and of course, TechStrong TVs, all of our TechStrong TV episodes are available on Digital Anarchist, and it's streamed live on Digital Anarchist as well. But let's get to today's show. We've got a nice show wrap tuned up for you today. Got some really good guests, good news, good information. We're going to start things off with a friend of mine from the cyberspace that I know for many years now, Manish Gupta. Manish is the CEO, founder of Shift Left. And I know Manish way before Shift Left, but, you know, Shift Left has been one of the kind of early companies that were out there around DevSecOps and this whole shift left of security. But they continue to innovate, right? And they continue to define DevSecOps. So I had a good chance to catch up with Manisha with some new news out of Shift Left and what they're happening. So check out my interview with my friend Manish. After that, I am happy to be joined by another CEO. This time it's Shahar Fogel of Rookout. Rookout's, you know, a player in the cloud native space. Shahar is the CEO there. He also has a lot of experience in private equity venture and everything. And it was nice getting his take on where Rookout is, and not only where Rookout is, but where the market is, how COVID is you know, influencing it and everything else. So do check out my interview with Shahar. And then lastly, something probably a little bit different for our audience here. I have John Joseph, who is one of the founders of Datanomics. Datanomics is just doing a phenomenal job going into what we would call, I guess, brownfield, right? Manufacturing facilities and adding in automation and instrumentation to help automation and, you know, figure out what's working, what's not working, what's efficient, what can be improved. And they're getting tremendous pickup, even with COVID and everything else. They're busier than ever. It's a great story. I think you're going to like what John has to discuss with us. After that, we're going to go to something old. And again, we're going to reach back to TechStrong Con, which was exactly a month and a day ago now. It seems like a long time, but it was only a month. And for today, we're going to feature a session that was done with Caleb Queen and John Willis. I think you're going to enjoy it. Of course, you can watch all of the TechStrong Con sessions available at TechStrong Con and on Digital Anarchist, on the new digitalanarchist.com. So please do check that out. After that, I think I'll be back with the news. And then over to Charlene O'Hanlon. And Charlene today has Jinan Budge, principal analyst at Forrester. It's always nice to have a Forrester analyst here. And Charlene's going to be talking about the difficulty in finding and retaining good cybersecurity talent. No joke there. By the way, we're working on something here at Media Ops around finding talent and your open job recs. And I'd love to get some people to bounce some ideas off of. If you're having trouble finding cybersecurity talent, DevOps talent, developers, write me at alan@mediaops.com. I'd love to hear from you and understand a little bit about what your problems are, how you're addressing them, and maybe give you an insight into what we're thinking about and see if it makes sense. Anyway, after that, Charlene will be doing a webinar preview for our webinars that are upcoming, both today, tomorrow, next week. And then we're going to head things over to Mitchell over at the Analyst Corner. Mitch has a good commentary today on, is there such a thing as a career path anymore? Certainly it's not what it was when I was coming out of college, and it's changed. Mitch is going to go into depth on that. And then we're lucky to have Mike Vizard and Frank Olhurst on our channel roundup today with a nice channel focused session, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. And then I'll be around to close things up. Sounds like an action-packed couple of hours here for TechStrong TV on Thursday, July 9th. We're going to take a commercial break right now, and I'll be right back with our first guest. As I mentioned at the top of the show, our first guest today is the CEO founder of Shift Left. I first met Manish Gupta, 12 or 15 years ago. He was at McAfee at the time, and we got to know each other. We were talking about a potential deal and strategic deal, and though we didn't get a deal done, I've remained friends with Manish ever since. He's just a really smart guy, especially in the cybersecurity and business space. I enjoy listening and learning from him. When he started Shift Left, he was early in the DevSecOps space. It was, the whole concept of shifting left was still rather new in security. But you know what? Even that's probably 40 plus years ago, about 4 years ago now. Shift Left continues to kind of lead the way in DevSecOps and shifting security left. I had a really good talk with Manish about what he's up to at Shift Left, how COVID has affected things, and where he sees the market. Let's go to my interview right now with Manish Gupta, CEO of Shift Left.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment for TechStrong TV. As I was talking off camera with my next guest, one of the things about COVID is we don't get a chance to go out to conferences, see people in person, shake hands anymore. But in doing TechStrong TV, I do get a chance to at least talk to my friends in the industry. My next guest is someone who I know was 12 years, Manish, maybe more. 15. It's a long time. He doesn't look that old, but I know Manish Gupta, CEO of Shift Left, for a long time. And of course, if you're not familiar with Shift Left, they were one of the first companies that I saw adopt this whole, no pun intended, this whole shift left sort of paradigm for how we should be approaching security in an age of DevOps and working with DevOps teams and developers and making security. Now, of course, it's common, Manish, right? And it's an accepted thing that this is a good way of doing things. But when you first started, there was a lot of missionary work there, right? In terms of getting people to accept the whole shift left way of thinking. Anyway, Manish Gupta, CEO, Shift Left, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here.
Yes. So it's got to be now, about 4 or 5 years for Shift Left?
Yeah, about 3.5 years, yes.
Yeah. I remember when you were launching. So bring us up to date. What's been happening? What's going on in Shift Left?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. As you said, 3.5 years ago when we started the company, we called it Shift Left. Myself, I've been in network security for about 20 years of my career. And as we saw how rapidly sort of the modern software development lifecycle was helping developers write code and deploy it in the hybrid cloud, our thesis was that application security is going to become much more important, right? Whereas if you look before 2015 and before, application security is never really done well compared to network or endpoint security or some of the other security segments. And we called the company Shift Left because we knew that security, in order to do a better job, needed to shift left, that we cannot just protect software by reacting to threats. So, fast forward 3.5 years hence, and shift left is a household term. Every CISO that I talk to has an internal project which is called Shift Left, which of course we love to hear. And what we've done over the last 3.5 years is essentially develop an application security solution that is purpose-built for the modern software development lifecycle. What is different? Why do we need application security purpose-built? Is because, let's think about it. The latest generation of application security companies started in circa 2005, 2006, roughly 14, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
What has changed in the last 14, 15 years ago, right? Well,
Everything.
Exactly, everything. We have Git-based development mechanisms, right? Git-based repositories, GitHub, GitLab, on-prem, Git, etc., which allow us, all developers, to develop code much more quickly, right? Number two, we are all using a bunch of open source libraries and frameworks like Spring Boot, right? And thousands of libraries. We are deploying cloud-based applications that talk to other cloud-based applications over APIs, right? And these applications have tremendous amount of business that they're driving, as well as tremendous amount of customer information that they have. And so it is clear that we need to insert security in a very seamless manner because, look, whether we like it or not, developers are largely measured by their ability to deliver features on time. Very rarely is a developer measured on the quality of security of her code, right? And so to the extent that we continue to ask developers to do security using legacy tools that create more headache for them, minimize or impact their productivity, sooner or later those tools are left behind, right? Instead, the need is to come up with a security solution that seamlessly inserts itself into this modern software development lifecycle, allowing developers to remain highly productive, but also be able to do security. And that is what I'm most proud of that we've achieved at Shift Left, especially with this latest announcement that we made yesterday, where we have now created a very native workflow for developers. It's just, given it's a workflow, you got to try it. It's hard for me to just put it in words. But the idea is that you come to Shift Left, for example, with your GitHub credentials, you use them to log in, and that's it. That's all literally you have to do. Because we will take a look at your repo or set of repos, we will analyze those applications, and because we are very fast, 40 times faster than any other code analysis solution in the market, and we are also, because we are the most accurate, about 3.5 times more accurate than any other code analysis in the market, you get results almost instantaneously, and results that are very accurate, as a result of which there is confidence that, yes, these are the things that I need to fix.
Understood.
Right? And at the end of the day, right, all of this is me sort of telling you what Shift Left is, but we have to measure this, right? And that's where we are starting to see some amazing numbers. So I'll give you some contrasting data points. One of the seminal reports that gets published every year is a report called State of Software Industry.
Sure.
In it, it claims about 0.3% of the customers scan daily. Our customers are scanning 20 times an hour.
Wow.
Right? Now, why should scanning more frequently matter? Because if you're a developer and if you're developing faster, very much like every time you make a change, your code is compiled and you get instantaneous feedback. Hey, Alan, based on the change that you made, here is a mistake you made, right? And you go fix it. It's a bug.
Yeah.
But if the security tool is going to take you an hour, what are you going to do? Right? You're clearly going to move on, right? It's impacting.
You'll catch it later.
Right.
the frequency of scanning has to match at least minimally
Yep.
the frequency of deployment, if not the frequency of checking in, of committing code, right? And in order, Manish, I've said this and I've been saying it for a while now. We need to make security synonymous with quality. So it is a bug. It's not necessarily a vulnerability or something, but to have quality code, there's the mindset has to be, I check the quality of my code every time I commit to a Git or whatever I'm using, right, a repo, and of course in a world where Manish, these applications, 85% of them, of the application are made of components that come from other repos, right? And I kind of glue them all together, Frankenstein style. I need to check not only the finished thing, but I may need to go check all of what the so-called this software composition analysis or whatever they call it now, right? All of these components. It's such go back to when you and I knew each other. You were at McAfee, the vulnerability scanning. You guys had Foundstone and that. If you can get a company that would scan once a quarter, they were a fantastic example, right? Thank God. Versus what you say, 20 times an hour, your average customer scanning. Phenomenal. Crazy.
You said something really nice, something really important, that security needs to become synonymous with quality.
Yeah.
Right? But in order for that to happen, right, what we therefore need to do, the onus is on us, not on developers, right? The onus is on us, on security companies, to create a workflow, to create an experience where security issues are highlighted to the developer in the same manner that quality issues are highlighted, right? And that is what we've achieved, right? Is like, as soon as you compile, as soon as you submit, you do a feature push within your own feature branch, it's compiled and you get quality issues highlighted to you. Now, in the same vein, in the same time frame, shift left now tells you security issues. And it is because of this that we find that 70%, right? Again, this is a stark contrast to what happens with legacy tools. 70% of the vulnerabilities that developers find using shift left are fixed within the first 3 weeks.
I love it. That's amazing. What an amazing stat that is. Good stuff. So Manish, do you think that there was this whole thought, can you shift too far left? How far left do you shift? Do you think the right place then is at the time code gets committed to a Git or a repo? Or is that just one place where you should also be scanning prior to deployment? Like when we look at the software development lifecycle left to right, there are several places where it could be logical to scan. Where do you think those, where are the right places?
Great question. So the only thing left of where we are recommending you do code analysis, which is with every feature push, right? And this is way before deployment, right? Because you feature push within your new feature branch, then once you've completed, you merge into the main branch, then it is tested, right? And then finally it's deployed. So we are talking about doing code analysis with each feature push, right? Now, of course, if you want to do it any point later, that's perfectly fine with us, because maybe you're not as mature, maybe you don't want to boil the ocean right away, right? For whatever other reason, right? Only thing left of this feature push is the IDE, where the developer is writing code. Right. Now, there are many in security who would argue that, hey, why don't we just analyze for security issues while the developer is writing code, right? Kind of like the Word document looking for spelling or grammatical.
Right, we are the red underlines immediately, yeah.
Right. Now, the challenge with that is twofold. One, as the developer is writing code, you do not have complete knowledge of the code because it's still being written, right? And so you cannot do an accurate analysis. you can only point to a small percentage of the problems, number one. But that is fine. That's just a limitation of technology that is secondary in nature. The first most important aspect, we recently did a survey, and the results are available on our website. There were about 165 people who responded to the survey, majority of them being developers. We asked them, at what point when code analysis is done, does it impact your productivity the most? You know what? The number one place where they said was in the IDE. They said,
Really?
Exactly. When code analysis is being done in the IDE, that impacts my productivity the most. And it's very logical because I'm in the process of writing code. I have the logic of the feature that I want to implement. And now suddenly this thing is telling me, dude, you're doing this thing wrong, right? And because it does not have the entire context, many a times it's telling me things that are not really wrong.
Right. Exactly. So the wrong place then.
It is
Too far left. Too far left.
That's right. Too far left. Now, having said that, there are things that one should use the IDE for, right? But it is not to do static code analysis, but actually to display the results to the developers, right? To integrate, because that is the thing that developers live and breathe in, right? Is their IDE.
Understood. I'm going to bring up another touchy subject with you, if you don't mind. So I was talking to some of my friends in the continuous testing space. As a matter of fact, we're going to be spinning up a regular episode every other week here on TechStrong TV, about a half hour, 45-minute episode called DevOps Unbound. And it's going to talk about testing and speed and all of these things. One of the issues I think that we've created with all of this, Manish, is, we used to have a profession of testing, QA people, right? And some people thought QA people were developers who weren't good enough to be developers, and they did testing. Some people thought it was like a way station on the way to becoming a developer, right? Kind of an evolution. But nevertheless, what we've seen with continuous testing is something similar we're seeing with shift left security, which is we are moving the onus for quality to the developer. So now all of a sudden, those tests are automated, they're continuous, same kind of thing we're doing in security, as it's committed or what have you. And we're asking the developer to be not only the developer, but the QA person as well. And now we're asking the developer to be not only the developer, but the app security guy as well, all under the guise of making it higher quality. And meanwhile, the developer is really sort of the alpha predator, right, on our chart here. The hardest person to hire, right, to get enough good developers. Are we putting too much on the developer, to be too responsible for QA, for security, and for developing the code? How do we balance that?
That's a great question. I love that question. 60% of the work in application security is done by developers, right? Mm-hmm. And it is very logical to understand that because, if some issue is found in a piece of code, clearly the only person who can fix that is the developer, right? Now, we also, to your point, we should not expect the developer to become a security expert. Right? Because then he's not a developer anymore, right? So this is the other facet of what we have done at Shift Left, which is very differentiated in the market. We realized that there are two parties here who play a very important role. Developer, clearly, because even before Shift Left showed up, 60% of the work for application security is done by the developer. But application security also plays a very important role. Typically a developer has visibility, very deep visibility into the code that she's writing, that she's responsible for. But application security has a very broad knowledge of the entire organization. And so it is the application security person, not the developer, who can come up with the right security policies. How much risk are we taking by allowing this application to do X, Y, and Z, right? And now the challenge with this model today is with this manual legacy tool-driven model is the typical ratio between developers and application security, Alan, is about 200 is to 1.
I was going to say 10 to 1, 200 to 1. My God.
To 1, right?
Crazy.
Crazy. So if we are expecting, which is what the current workflows demand, one application security person somehow has to influence the work of 200 developers. Impossible, right? And so that's one of the things that we've done, therefore, is very much like infrastructure became code and therefore became automated. Very similarly now, we allow application security to translate their requirements into code, right? And that code, those rules are now automatically enforced every time a developer does a feature push, right? So it is with this seamless automation, but this applying the knowledge of application security to now 200 developers, right? So this is how we're going to solve this problem, because clearly there aren't too many application security people available. Even if they were available, there is no company who's going to hire the same number of application security folks as the number of developers, right? Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. And so those are some of the things which is because of which we are seeing, like I told you, 70% of the vulnerabilities get fixed because developers know that these are the vulnerabilities that application security is prioritized for them, depending upon the application. This is a customer-facing application. It deals with customer-sensitive data. And so anything that has leaking data cannot be allowed. Any code injection vulnerabilities should not be allowed. But this is a backend service, right? Here we can perhaps be a bit more forthgiving. That is the visibility that application security brings.
Excellent. Manish, we're almost out of time. You know what? We jumped into things. For our audience out there, they want to find out more about Shift Left. It's shiftleft.io, isn't it?
Correct.
Shiftleft.io is the website. For someone who maybe is looking to get started with Shift Left, what do you recommend?
Yeah, actually go to our website, shiftleft.io. And as of yesterday, we have launched a developer-first workflow. So as I mentioned, all you need to do is just use your GitHub credentials, sign up, and just see for yourself what the tool is capable of doing. You don't need to talk to anyone. Find out whether this is something that is beneficial to you or not.
That's excellent, man. That's an easy on-ramp, as they say in the business. Good for you. Manish, a pleasure seeing you. I'm so happy to see you well and safe. Stay well and safe. Come back and visit us soon, okay?
Same here, Alan. Looking forward to grabbing a cup of coffee when this crisis is over.
Soon, I hope. Yeah, one day. All right. Manish Gupta, CEO, Shift Left here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
We see so many new startups coming out of Israel. It's a kind of a startup country, and many of them using open source and cloud native and the latest technologies. One of the companies that's caught my eye recently is a company called Rookout. It's not that they just launched, they've been around, but they seem to have a really good story, making the right moves, and it looks like a steady hand at the wheel. I had a chance to meet their CEO, Shahar Fogel. And Shahar comes to Rookout after spending more than several years over in both the UK and Switzerland in startup and venture capital private equity situations. And I think that experience kind of shines through when you see how Rookout is navigating the startup waters. let's now go to my interview with Shahar Fogel, CEO of Rookout, and find out what's happening.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Shahar Fogel of Rookout. You may not be familiar with Rookout. We have covered them over on Container Journal and DevOps.com, but hopefully you'll be familiar with them after this interview. Shahar, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. So Shahar, for our audience maybe who isn't familiar with Rookout, why don't you give us a little bit of a Rookout background story as well as your own personal journey?
Cool. So basically in Rookout, we enable developers and dev organizations to increase velocity of their dev practices, spend more time on building new features, and spend less time on debugging and fixing issues. We enable that by allowing them to get access to data which are running on remote environments, on their live application, on the production environments in real time with a click of a button and without the need to wait for long deployment cycles and without the need to write more code, basically. So, anything you need from your application, you just click on the click of a button in the Rookout platform and you get the data you need from it.
Fantastic.
Basically, the space we're operating in is the understandability space. It may not be known as a common practice, but everyone is talking about observability and monitoring and these types of tools, APM tools. But these tools are pointing a finger at places you have issues at, or instances or servers or errors in your application, but they don't allow you to understand and to get to the root cause of the problem. And this is where Rookout comes in. We basically, once they show you the way, we enable you to get a deep dive onto what's happening in your application in real time, get the data you need in order to make more insightful decisions as to what needs to be fixed, how it needs to be fixed, what you need to do in your application. Basically, data-driven decision in development process. We're seeing our clients are using us in various use cases, both in terms of the normal use case of debugging and solving issues, but also in terms of dynamic logging and getting metrics from your application. Also in terms of getting into new applications. So if you're a developer and you're getting a new application that you need to learn or understand how it works, reading the code is not enough. You need to understand how it operates, how the data flows within the application. Now this, using Rookout, you shorten the time to understand what it's actually doing by tenfold, basically.
Excellent. And Shahar, what about you? What's your position? How did you come to Rookout?
So today I'm the CEO of Rookout. I started my career somewhere 20 years ago. I started it in the Israeli Intelligence Corps in R&D positions. I spent around 9 years there doing R&D roles in the cybersecurity space, development, team leading, group managing, architecture, hardcore R&D roles. Afterwards, I moved to the UK. I did an MBA there, moved a bit to the business side. After the UK, I moved to Switzerland. I spent around 8 years in Switzerland, the beginning in a VC fund, doing mainly early stage investments, enterprise software, early stage seed A rounds. Afterwards, I moved to product positions in some of our portfolio companies, a company called Connectic, then Brantix, doing mainly R&D and product work, but taking my R&D background and the business education and experience in VC to actually understand markets and clients and everything around the commercial space and putting it into effect. I joined Rookout 5 months ago today, and basically this is my path.
Excellent. So I got to assume when you joined, you didn't think a pandemic would kind of put the world on its head here. It probably wasn't in your business model that you drew up and and approved by the board, but nevertheless, it's here. I mean, the good news is though that the place you play in, right, where Rookout works here, is helping companies as they transform to the cloud, as they service remote workers, update their applications for remote working and all of this. A product like Rookout obviously would help a lot.
So for sure, yeah, the COVID was my entrance gift to the role.
Yeah.
I spent 4 weeks in the role before everyone got sent home to quarantine. But in terms of the company, there was a few weeks at the beginning that there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. No one knew what's happening, how the market is going to be, but we're a startup, so we're a speedboat. So we changed our messaging, we adapted our business plan, we adapted our go-to-market. We targeted, basically we're a market agnostic product. Every organization who has a dev organization within and the tech stack we support can use us. But we wanted to understand, first of all, our existing clients, how we can help them, how we can deliver the value that we're bringing, and also in terms of the business plan, targeting companies that are, doing well or were not hurt significantly by COVID. And, in terms of what we do and how we help them, so our product is helping organizations who are working in remote environments, with servers and architectures that are not accessible to them on the day-to-day, on one hand. So, we resonated very much with prospects and our existing clients. On the flip side, in terms of the understandability, so it became very hard for organizations, and we're seeing it in discussions that we started, at the beginning of COVID, and to date, that people are not working together in an office anymore. So it's very difficult to go to the dev next to you to tap on his shoulder and ask them, what is this doing? Or what, you have to deal with things yourself. And our tool basically enables them to understand applications, to understand issues in a much faster and productive way. So, we came in to help and to bring additional value into the, let's call it a new norm of working remotely.
Excellent. I love it. I wanted to talk a little bit about the model, the Rookout model, because, it seems like 100 years ago. But back in January, we did a Predict 2020, was one of the virtual events that we do every year. And I did a session there called The Democratization of IT, about the builders inheriting the earth, right? The builders shall inherit the earth. And the idea behind it was, I'm in IT 30 years, right? And, traditionally, software was sold to the enterprise by enterprise salespeople making in-person calls and with very long sales cycles and proof of concepts and all of these kinds of things. But that's not the way the world is. Today, you put money into DevRel, right, into developer relations, and the emphasis is on getting product into people's hands. If your audience is developers, get the product into the developers' hands. Let them use it. If they like it, they'll figure out, and they'll tell their managers, and it works its way up the chain, and they figure out a way to buy it, right? But whether it's open source or freemium or open core or free forever, but not the source code, whatever. It's about getting the software in people's hands. Talk to us about the Rookout distribution model.
So in Rookout, we operate in kind of two models, the classical top-down. And when I say top-down, it's not necessarily going to the CTO or the VP R&D and selling to him, but more of the mid-level organizations, architects, team leads, group managers, principal engineers that understands the value in a wider sense of time spent on debugging and best practices and new tools, and targeting them in our marketing campaign. But Nevertheless, we invest a lot of effort and money and product work in enabling developers to actually take the product, use it, see if they like it, understand the value, and just kind of go bottom up from there. So in our website, anyone can go, can download a community edition. It's a free license. They can use, they can install. If they have problems, of course, they can talk to us, and we'll be more than happy to support and help them in onboarding. The only issue here, in regards to Rookout and tools like us with agents that are running in remote environments, is that once you want to put it into your organization, you have to go through some processes, security, compliance, and to understand that the tools that you're running in your remote environments, in your sensitive environments, are things that you can put there. Not every developer can just upload something to production because there's a lot of considerations there. So of course we
hope not anyway. But too often you find out they did.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad practices also today in how do you access remote environments. SSH directly to servers and unsecure bad practices that are in the market today. So our tool basically enables you to kind of put that aside, use something that is secure. We're SOC 2 compliant. We're investing a lot of effort in security, in audit logs, and a lot of features that are suitable for enterprises, for large organizations that needs these capabilities in our tool. And so once the developer likes it, we're getting in any case to a discussion where we need to bring in these stakeholders within the organization to put us in. Not only the budget, but also the other people that needs to approve it. And we're seeing good results there. We have some Fortune 100 clients. So we've been able to pass through rigorous processes in financial institutions. So we're seeing a lot of adoption in that space, and we're seeing the need. Everyone knows the pain. Once you see the product, once you see the demo, it resonates in a second. How can it hasn't been existed until now? What did I did until now without this tool? So once you get someone to see it, it's there. Our challenge is to educate the market because people just don't know that it exists. They're just continuing to work in their existing habits and workflows, and just accepting the pain of debugging. Developers knows that 60-70% of their time is solving issues where it can be reduced significantly.
Sure. So I like that you have both methods. It would seem to me the people using the freemium or the community edition, as you called it, if I was one of your salespeople, those are the people I would be talking to. They're already using the product, right? Versus trying to go out and cold call, and explain to people what it does and so forth.
Yeah, so it's both. The developers, we know it's a very special type of persona. They like to just
they love salespeople.
Sorry?
I said they love salespeople.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's even when they like it, it's sometimes more challenging to talk to them. We're doing it. We're all developers. Me and all the rest of the people in the company, both from the marketing and sales side. We all come from tech background, so we know. We understand the pain. We experienced it firsthand. But on the flip side, the traditional world of, let's call it, not really enterprise sales, because the persona that we're selling to are also developers, just in a high enough level to understand the pain in a more organizational level. Not only I'm a developer, I have this pain, it can save me an hour or 2 or 3, but in an organizational level, it's tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars that can be saved every month, every year. Using our tool. So we're trying to mix and understand what's the best way. We're still a startup, yeah, and we're experimenting with the market. It's a new market, So
Got it. Excellent. So, got a couple minutes left, not much time. Anything new news-wise out of Rookout recently?
yeah, so we've been seeing first of all, we're constantly trying to expand our capabilities and the features that we're giving our clients. We're releasing new features almost on a weekly basis that enables our client to do more. A lot of simplicity work around the product. Eventually, it's a complex, deep tech product. So we're enabling client just to install it, use it, enjoy it very quickly, very simply, without a lot of need to adjust it and configure it. So we're investing a lot of time around that space. A big feature that was released a few weeks ago is around the data on-prem. So a lot of companies that have sensitive data, especially big enterprises, are very very strict around letting data out of their premise or out of their systems. And we're eventually a SaaS company, so data flows, and they don't like it. So we developed a new architecture that enables you to put a controller on your premise. The data stays on your premise, and you can still use our web platform as the SaaS solution to control what you want to do. But we don't see the data, we don't see the source code, we don't have any access to any of your private information. It's like walking without and filling with. So it's a very unique solution, and it's bringing us a lot of traction in with these types of organizations that for a SaaS company is very difficult to talk to.
Excellent. Shahar, we didn't tell people the website.
It's rookout.com.
Rookout.com. There it is. ROOKOUT. All right. Maybe next time we have you on, you'll explain to us how the name Rookout came to be.
Will do.
Next time. But we're out of time right now. Shahar Fogel, CEO at Rookout. Thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. And good luck with Rookout. Check it out, rookout.com. Thank you. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
My next interview is a little different in that this isn't a DevOps necessarily or a cybersecurity tool, but it is an interesting software play by a team of experienced, seasoned software executives. I interviewed John Joseph, who's the CEO of Datanomics. And, Datanomics is instrumenting and providing really great analytics and insight into how manufacturing plants and other types of industries are adopting automation and becoming more efficient. John explains it much better than me, and I think after listening to him, you'll agree that what they're doing over at Datanomics is pretty cool, and there's a lot of companies that are seeing a ton of value in this. So I think this is something that has some legs, and you're going to be hearing more and more about Datanomics over the months ahead. So let's now go to our interview with John Joseph, CEO at Datanomics.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this segment of TechStrong TV. Our guest this segment is John Joseph of Datanomics. Hey John, welcome.
Good morning, Alan. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to have you on the show. So John, we haven't, as we were talking earlier, we haven't really featured Datanomics on TechStrong at all. I don't know, how much our audience knows about Datanomics and yourself. So why don't we start there? Why don't you give us a good background here so we know what we're coming from?
Sure. Datanomics is a company that was founded in 2016. My partner, Greg McHale, and I have been working there ever since. Our focus is to enable people who own discrete component manufacturing companies to see their factory floors in real time. So what we learned, having worked together in previous companies, I've got a long history in IT. Right out of college, I went into an engineering job at a large global computer company. Long story short, about 17 years ago, I ended up at a company called EqualLogic in Nashua, New Hampshire. We took EqualLogic from zero to $150 million in annual revenue and an ultimate acquisition by Dell in 2008. I stayed with Dell for 3 years to scale that business to 40 to 50,000 customers worldwide. Getting to know the Dell team, it was an excellent experience. Went on to found another company called Data Gravity, ultimately acquired by HighTrust, and then went to work with two Internet of Things companies. One was Bluestream, which was temperature, humidity, acceleration sensing technology that was used for instrument cases, wine cellars, humidors, canidors, you name it. They could sense temperature, humidity, vibration, and alert people when they were either too high or too low, and protect valuable instruments, protect wine cellars, protect all kinds of interesting things like RVs and boats and things. Greg and I were working informally, and in late 2016, I decided to join him formally and came in as CEO of his company. And so what we did was we started to look for data streams that we could tap into and transform that data stream into value for the user. And what we learned was that through a number of conversations, some interaction with Worcester Polytech, which is where WPI is where Greg and I both went to college. We met with a lot of alumni. They put us in touch with people in various CNC manufacturing companies, and we started to do focus groups with some of these customers. What we learned in those focus groups was that they were running their businesses with paper travelers, with whiteboards, and with ERP systems that were all written in the late 1990s, early 2000s. The problem with those quote unquote technologies is that they're always late to give answers that people need about what's happening on the production floor right now. We learned through a number of other conversations that many of the CNC machines, computer numerical control CNC machines, that basically cuts a metal part from a piece of raw stock into a finished part. It could go into a jet, aerospace, Department of Defense products, jet engines, any kinds of engines, manifolds, pumps, very small, intricate, highly precise parts. And so the industry worldwide is massive. It's a $100 billion industry. In the United States, there are 25,000 different companies that do CNC machining of various levels and capabilities. And on those CNC machines is a protocol called MT Connect. MT Connect is, if you're familiar with the IT world, it's the SCSI of machines. What it does is it gathers together all of the parametric data, all of the sensor data that's within that cutting tool. The cutting tool is about the size of a delivery van. It aggregates up that data and pushes that data out for over this MT Connect protocol, broadcasting it to anything that might want to read that data and do something with it. What we learned, interestingly enough, is that very few companies are actually doing anything with the MT Connect data that their CNC machines produce. There's a common name for this product category. People call it machine monitoring. So we use this Internet of Things capability to monitor our machines, to understand their service needs, their health, their status, whether they're on or off. And as Greg and I started to think about the data we were seeing in this MT Connect data stream, we started to see very different patterns that were far more important than basic machine monitoring. We started to see the ability to broadcast to the manufacturing floor production intelligence in real time. So as we intercepted that data stream, we would take the pieces out of it that were important relative to giving people an indication of whether production was on track or off track, and we started to form the product. So in 2019, we came to market with our first generation of the product, and we called it Fusion. That product is connected to, say, 50 machines in a manufacturing floor. It aggregates all of that data, processes it locally with an edge device, pushes it to the cloud, in our case, Microsoft Azure Cloud, in a very secure way, highly encrypted, both at rest in the manufacturing site and in the cloud. And what we reflect back to the customer is what we call fusion factor. It's a production score of how production is going on that particular job. So what we see is a person is making an aircraft engine turbine blade, and they make thousands of these blades every day. The cost of the materials to make this blade are incredible. And so making a blade that ends up being rejected for some reason is very costly. So if we're able to tell you that your cycle time, your part count, your utilization rates, your alarm codes are on track and producing that part the way you expect it to be produced, if we give you if we assign that to a letter grade and tell you that it's on track, on course, at speed, that's great. If there's a problem with that machine, that's not great. You need to address that machine. So we created this fusion factor, which is the production score telling users that their job is performing to expectations. What people were doing before we introduced our product was they would wait to hear a loud noise in the factory. They would look for smoke coming from a machine for lack of coolant, cutting tool oils and things like that. I worked in a machine shop right out of college, and I can tell you that loud noises are an indication of very bad things. And so if you're able to forewarn people predictively and preemptively forewarn them that something bad is about to happen to a job that they need badly for a key customer, they're grateful to you. Again, long story short on the company, we've taken this to over 30 customers now, with about 50 more wanting to do pilots with us. We're getting acceptance for a pilot about every 2 days. We get a new pilot since we launched our company back in November, commercially made the product available. And the reaction to the product has been phenomenal. They just love the product that we developed.
Love it.
So that's what we're focused on right now.
I mean, what's interesting, John, is, you know, if you look at the arc of your personal story and how it intersects here, you know, if you hadn't worked in the IoT companies, you never would have had the kind of expertise or the insight into, in essence, you know, calibrating the assembly lines or the not the assembly lines, but the factory, if you will, right? It's in that same kind of thing, and it really, you know, there's so many parallels, frankly, to software development, right? Of where you need to monitor every step of the process. And you know, and here at DevOps.com, we talk about how much lean IT and DevOps borrows from lean manufacturing, but it's not just the just-in-time inventory and everything else. It's really the process, if you will, of how we produce goods, and whether it be software or other stuff. So I got to ask you the question, though. How you guys just launched in November. I'm going to assume your business plan did not have should we do if there's a pandemic and everything shuts down. How has COVID and everything with that kind of affected the plan and operations and what's going on?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, with the shutdown of a lot of industries, ironically, manufacturing of some of these key components for medical devices and several of our making parts for ventilators and things like that. And so we were asked not to come to their factories, but because they were afraid of contagion and things like that. But what they discovered through the process was that because they needed to isolate from other people in the factories and protective gear and things like that, it underscored the importance of production intelligence technology like ours even more. And the demand for our product has grown even further. So we really haven't slowed down. We didn't shut down. We just told our employees to work from home for a while, but we're able to work with our customers, have them self-install and monitor the installation remotely, and we kept going. So it's been great for us.
Good for you guys. It's interesting that you're able to do this install remotely and do handle the whole thing actually remote without having to actually go down to the facility.
Yeah, it's fairly straightforward. The modern day controllers for these CNC machines have an Ethernet port in the back of the controller. We just plug into that Ethernet port and either wirelessly or wire into their network on site, and we're good to go. We're ready to go. Very simple process.
So is this? I mean, look, I've been in business a long time too, since I got out of college, right? And they should all go that easy, right? That there's an Ethernet port in the back of the machine. We plug it in, and we're in wirelessly over the network, and it's all good. How many, what percentage of jobs, prospects do you go into where it is really that simple versus, there's something legacy there that just is the fly in the soup?
Yeah. About 60% of the shops that we go into, we call them shops, but they're formal, large manufacturing companies with hundreds of thousands of square feet of floor space. About 60% of them have machines where it's a simple plug-in.
That's great.
Within those factories, the machine split is about 60% Ethernet connectable, 40% legacy. So what I mean by legacy is it's a machine that was built somewhere in the 1990 to 2005 timeframe. And what we've done is we've built a kit for that machine so we can monitor that machine using other means. It's a little bit more complicated than the Ethernet plug, but the only thing that we're not able to derive from that machine, that legacy machine, is the alarm codes that it produces. So essentially we can connect to any CNC machine tool in their factory for any operation that they're looking at and start to build this hierarchy of information that we push to them. I think it's important to note what that hierarchy is and where we're headed as a company. Our first foray was really to focus on production intelligence. So how is my machine job combination performing to expectations? We need about 20 to 30 parts run through that machine to calibrate on what the benchmark is for that job. And then once we've calibrated to that benchmark, we start to apply a score. If you're getting a B, you're on track. If you're getting a C, you need to give some attention to that machine because it's headed in the wrong direction. If you're getting an A, literally giving them a letter grade, because it's very easy to understand the assignment of a letter grade. If you're getting an A, you're doing great. Go focus on your C's and make your C's better, and your production output will be vastly different than not having this information. So our first generation of our product is focused on that production intelligence capability. On top of that, why wouldn't you aggregate all of that visualization information across your factory floor and now start to give ownership, production supervisors, operations leaders, the ability to see their entire factory at a summary level? So every morning at 6 a.m., the vice president of operations or the president of the company comes in, opens up their email, because a lot of these guys come to work very early. They come in before their operators come in and start their machines at 7 a.m. And they get a factory trends report. Open up the trends report and you see that your factory is on par, ahead of schedule, or lagging behind. You also get a coffee cup report. Go get yourself a cup of coffee, and within 5 minutes, you can see the entire factory of yesterday's production and how it performed. I have a lot of friends and relatives who work in this industry that tell me every morning they send employees out to the floor to find out what the parts inventory is, how production went yesterday, how things went over the course of the last shift, because no one knows. Wouldn't it be amazing if I could give you 90 minutes back in your day, not having to ask people in the factory questions, by applying a technology that offered you real-time production intelligence? So, right? Isn't that great?
It's great. It is.
So what our customers have said to us after looking at and using the product is, I don't have to walk around and ask people questions. I immediately sit down at my email, open it up, read it. I know exactly what questions to ask the people on the floor during our production meeting, getting ready for what we have to do to meet critical customer demand. I'm not guessing, I'm not waiting, it's right there in front of me. And so when we apply this technology, both in the front office and on the production floor, we're seeing 25 to 30% increases in productivity and output from the employees. Why? Because they rally around getting the right message off of the production floor, and people work together more cohesively. One more point that I think is important. Not only are we going up in factory, giving factory trends, we're also looking at addressing part quality. What we're talking about is a massive amount of data that people have just let lay fallow for years. And so we take that data, we process it, and now we start putting it to work for people in quality control so that they're able to see, hey, that's interesting. These 100 parts that we made look a little bit funny. Let's zero in on these parts, not the entire population of parts. And so now you've got this stratification of factory, machine, part intelligence that we're applying. You now have the knowledge worker is now the digital machinist that goes into these CNC manufacturing environments.
Excellent, man. John, we're about out of time, but I want to thank you for coming on. You know what? We didn't tell people what the website was.
Website is datanomics.io, DATANOMIX.io.
MIX.io. Datanomics. Hey, man, helping to build the factories of tomorrow, with better software and technology. Good stuff, John. John Joseph of Datanomics here on TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Join top experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event, DevOps Open Source Insights and Innovations. Open source powers the world, drives innovation in technology and in practice, and reduces the proliferation of products that just don't work together. In the arena of DevOps, open source tools and standards enable problems to get solved. Come take a look at some of the ways Splunk solves problems with open source and how we are contributing to open source solutions to make your work life better. Register today.
Okay, up next on today's show is our Something Old. And as we've been doing lately, for the last month anyway, we're going to pull something from our TechStrong Con archives. As I mentioned at the top of the show, all of the TechStrong Con sessions are available up on TechStrongCon.com as well as on Digital Anarchist. But for today's show, we're going back to a two-person session with my friend John Willis and Caleb Queen. John and Caleb talk about automated governance in a fireside chat type of environment. I think it's perfect for TechStrong TV. So let's now go to Caleb Queen and John Willis from TechStrong Con.
Hey, this is John Willis. This is a TechStrong conference. So welcome everybody. I've got a fun guest this morning. We've talked a couple of times about, I guess, automated governance, cyber in some ways. I don't know, we could call it DevSecOps. I don't know. I get lost on the name of these things lately. Caleb, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Caleb Quern. I work for KPMG. I'm a director in the cyber practice. My job these days is mostly around leading our DevSecOps or secure DevOps, whatever you want to call it, and AppSec practice nationally. So I should say probably from the beginning, because I do want to make it clear for people, while I work for KPMG and most people associate KPMG with auditors, I personally am not one, but got plenty of friends in the industry.
The closest we can get here, at least on this call, right?
Yeah.
So what? Just quickly, what's your background? How did you wind up doing what you do?
Sure. So I was on the vendor side, as we say in the past. I spent about 10 years with a open source threat intel and anti-phishing company, and then about 5 years ago, I decided to shoot for different things, and that brought me to KPMG, where it's great because we get to solve some of the hardest challenges that large enterprises have, and in my case, solving and reducing risk, right? So they can focus on more important things like growth and innovation that benefits us all. So.
Yeah, that leads me into, and so last, I know you're aware of this, but for people listening, you probably, if you listened to me before, you've heard it 100 times, but last March, Gene Kim runs this forum where he invites about 40 or 50 people to Portland, and they work on research papers. And so I formed a group to work on what we call DevOps automated governance, and it was really to be a reference architecture with KPMG, with Marriott, PNC Bank, Capital One, Nike, Sabre Group, and Microsoft. And we produced a pretty. I was really proud of what we did. It was a reference architecture of how you actually can take. I would say that typically the way that we show evidence from an audit perspective in most enterprises is this subjective model where you create a change record, somebody describes what the change is going to be, possibly the alternatives, the risks, all these things, the continuity options. Somebody else reviews it, maybe asks for more paragraphs. It's really a telephone game, right, of subjective conversations. And then typically auditors come in and say, I want to see the evidence for this change or what this code is running. And they backtrace to the subjective, and in most cases, they wind up asking for screen prints. So one of the ideas with this paper was, could we make this more digital and electronic? It was 2019, and the idea was, could we actually, instead of making this subjective, make objective, what we call attestations, which are evidence of that you're following whatever your GRC. And so we did. We produced about 75 control points, which would be attestations anywhere from, it had to be in source control to a trusted source for an artifact to a green build, appearing on a pull request, all these things being electronic, digitally signed evidence. And at the end, you would have basically a mutable linked list of digitally signed, don't want to call it blockchain, but very similar to. And then the idea would be that theoretically, then an audit would go from like 30 days maybe to a half a day. The efficacy of the audit would really be much closer in line to what's really happening. And you could actually say, if we could accomplish this, then can we lower the bar for the centralized authority boards and CABs? And so my conversation with that was originally with a couple of banks, which was, I think the internal auditors are going to love this, right? This is all about efficiencies, higher efficacy, lower wasted time. But the concern I had, did we think the industry external auditors would be interested in this? And that's where we first met in Austin, and I was telling you this idea. So I wanted to recreate your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So to recap, internal auditors, the sense that you guys formed was that, it should be great. They're going to be very excited about all the benefits you just shared. And you said that Gene Kim also felt that external auditors would be excited.
We had went to Gene and asked, hey, Gene, what are your thoughts? Thinking he was closer to that. He was like, he thought, where we were thinking possibly, oh, no, they're not going to like this, 30 days to half a day. And he was like, no, actually, it's the opposite. They actually want to spend less time at site, and they want the efficiencies as well. So,
agreed. That's my sense, is that the benefits and the inevitability of this whole thing right? Whether or not anybody likes it or not is a little bit moot, right? It's just a matter of how soon this happens. So I think that everybody probably acknowledges that, to different degrees, they've internalized that this is going to happen. It's just, how and how, who leads it with, you guys' paper was a great, first shot. But I don't think that very many people would be resistant to this or adverse to this vision of how this can work and should work, probably. So again, all the benefits you talked about for the internal audit team are going to be the same probably for the external folks that you would hire to support those things, right? But no, it's just like we talked about pushing code to production in smaller bursts more often, right? It's the same thing with, well, why not do that in the way we practice audit, right? Smaller bursts more often, at lower cost and less risk each time. So.
Yeah, and it really, as was pointed out to me, when I first thought about this idea, we get the reference architecture, and then more people had conversations, say, oh, well, now I can do this, now I can do this, and I've actually had now a couple of friends / customers are doing some exciting things with this. And the one thing I found that is, we're always trying to create, raw monitoring data in IT, right? And we're trying to align it to the business. And quite honestly, for 20 years, we failed miserably at this. The accelerate metrics are good, but they're still very sort of latent. And, there's how many deploys, lead time. That's good stuff, but that's still, the value definitely is there for improvement and continuous improvement. But then I started thinking about, as people started using this DevOps automated governance reference architecture in a true implementation, I found that if you think about GRC, right, governance, risk, and compliance, it should, in most days, cover a good part of what the business goals are. And so when I found when you sort of tighten the loop and the feedback loop between policy people internally and manifesting that into human readable, then automatable, non-human, you actually get a large percentage of the business value for free.
Well, the last two words were particularly, eyebrow raising. What do you mean by for free?
All right. Well, so in other words, you can spend a whole lot of time trying to connect the dots between raw metrics in the delivery phase, and then how that applies to the actual business, right? And people have done good work there, but it is always a struggle. However, if you take the fact that, if you accept the fact that at some level, your operating review board or whatever, that your policies for risk and governance and compliance are in line with the goals of the business, if you can then implement this DevOps automated governance in a tight loop, I guess free is a pretty wide word, but in other words, you get a lot of that business metrics that you fight from the other angle. I can't know other way to say it, but for free, because you've implemented. In other words, let me go one more layer deeper. In one of the banks that I'm working with right now, they've actually created YAML-based policy as code files that the actual policy people are writing, and they're injecting that automatically into the delivery pipeline based on the reference architecture. So if the assumption is that the policy people do have a reasonable handle on the things that protect and promote the business, knock on wood, you would hope that's the case in most global 1000s, then you're actually getting a free tight alignment between what you're doing in the pipeline and what you're doing from what the business is trying to promote from them. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I think there's a lot of steps that kind of get abstracted away when we say it like that, right? Because the assumption is, our internal audit helps us reduce risk. Risk means saving money, right? Which we can then reinvest into growth and innovation, right? And so if we can hard code that into, in this case, YAML, sounds great, because then we can get that, real time, very cheaply, and with less human toil, to your T-shirts reference. But I think the part that, one of the things you said that, again, might cause people to kind of twitch for a second is this, I love it. I wish
like
all
maybe
banks had,
twitch, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I wish all banks had people in internal audit who could write YAML. And maybe you were being a little bit glib, and maybe those folks aren't literally hands on keyboard writing YAML, but that's that's uncommon.
Yeah.
And I think that's, it's not an assumption, but if we're going to do this, like, that's a new muscle that doesn't exist in most places, right?
Well, yeah, I agree. But in fact, in this bank, I'm being, I'm being literal. I mean,
Yeah.
the policy people are help design it. I mean, at the end of the day, like one way to look at YAML is it's the stuff that configures Kubernetes and like, oh my God, never. Or you could look at it, it's just human rateable stanza
Yeah.
models to say, here's a service, and actually, what's actually happening is you find this beautiful emergences. New teams are coming on board and they're told, hey, if you want these benefits of auto deploy and all this stuff, including a continuous compliance. In other words, if you want to be able to see everything as it's going, then you have to go to this team and then you're going to work with them to create
Yeah.
the policy. So in a sense, the teams are actually saying, hey, here's my service, here's the metadata for my service, here's what we're going to do. And they're like, okay, well, then we can just fill in the blanks in this template.
That's right.
But also I'm working with another group that's trying out Gherkin, right? And so again, you could look at it one way is, oh my God, Gherkin is what testers use and that's Cucumber. Or you could look at it as it really is a human readable, human interpretable way to ask questions against things.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen organizations that have tried to say, we're going to be a Gherkin organization. Like everybody in the company is going to learn Gherkin, everybody's going to learn Python, or what I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, there's still a long bridge for the average, but I think to your point earlier, some things are just, tough. It's inevitable, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for some context, right? And I'm reminded of this with my, I'll say day job, day in, day out, supporting clients as they try and become more secure as they build things, right? And I'll just say like the InfoSec or cybersecurity policy on what types of configurations, for example, should be in the service that somebody's building. That's really not precedent in many large organizations, right? I mean, if you say, you've got to do X and Y and Z, the policy that's written in this repository somewhere on our intranet, you need to go read that once in a while, right? I mean,
in some cases, they're printed books with,
right.
less case, they're sort of terribly indexed online wikis.
Yeah. I won't name names, but, and then you say, well, not only do you need to do that for your TLS configuration of the service you got to build, and we want to be able to, in an automated way, every time you push that thing out the door, make sure that it is up to snuff. You got to do the same thing with your internal audit policy. Those are each big asks for most people. And I hope I don't sound too like naysayer, because like I said at the beginning, this is the way. It's just going to be a lot of work for a lot of people, which is great because it's the right thing.
Yeah, the thing is, so I had this debate with somebody just recently. It was somebody at a bank, and they were telling me, yeah, that's great, John, but what we need to do is get all the data collected. And once we have all the data, then we can actually, and I'm like, no, because that's, what you need to create emergence. I mean, everything in what we do can be bounded by complexity theory, right? And the things we know about complexity is, you don't deterministically create things and they happen. It's just our world in IT, or really just in general, far beyond that. So what you look for is patterns where things can self-define and emerge. Mm-hmm. And what I find with this model of policy as code, with this DevOps automated governance, you find more and more teams want to come to this. And when they come to it, they're told, hey, this is the way you have to behave. Like you could stay in your own island but not get the benefits of auto deploy and right. Shortened audit time and all these things, or you can come to this and if you even, so one of the things that actually spawned this idea for me was a couple of things. It was actually a project from Google called Grapheus that was open source. That was the first interest, and then it was the Capital One article in 2017 where they explained how they did their pipelines, and they had a section on pipeline design. And they said that basically at the time it was in order to basically get automated deploy or capability to auto commit, auto deploy, right? You had to evidence these 16 gates, they called it.
Yep.
Right. And so it had to come source control. It had to have this. It had to have this. Right. And now, from what I've heard, it's way higher than 16. It's closer to 30. But I thought, well, if you're doing that, why can't you just make that the evidence? Mm-hmm. But and one of the things that when I talked to some of the people there at Capital One, they said that was really a gamification. In other words,
Mhm.
people would say, "How did you guys get to do auto deploy and all these not have to go to cab review board?" They said, "Oh, here's this internal doc. It says if you can evidence these 16 things,
Yeah.
then they'll let you skip the cab." And so I believe that the pack and DevOps governance will create, instead of trying to fight the battle of, hey, next team, you have to do this, make it available. People see the benefits and they'll come to
Yeah.
it.
One of the ways I think this is a parallel example of, they want to be in the fast lane, right? So, and it's the same that I think about, again, from the AppSec perspective, right? You can get the treatment, we can really give you the biz every time you try and push to deploy and go through all of the tests along the way. Or what if there's the TSA pre-check version of this type of thing?
That's right. That's right.
Who doesn't want pre-check? Everybody wants TSA pre-check,
Totally.
I think.
Yep.
And so one of the things you might do there is you don't say, hey, the characteristics that make you a less risky passenger. Well, what pre-check does, they would say, you meet X and Y and Z, right? Maybe you're over the age of 65, the background check says you look good, all these things. But similarly, we can do the same thing for apps, and we say, not only do you tend to have less criticals and highs every time we do this, but you're great at reducing them fast, right? Because we know everybody's going to come through the pipeline and have some volumes pop up on the scanners, but you guys are in the top 5% in remediation speed, mean time to remediation. So the same thing that is what you're just saying about Cap One, right? They've made it so that you want to be part of that TSA pre-check of these 16 checks, or whatever it is now, 30, but it's attractive enough so that they get the privilege of not getting the full pat down. Right?
That's a great. I love the TSA pre-check analogy. I'm going to add that to my set because that's a perfect way to. I mean, I've seen people call it DevOps mode or mode 1 or mode 2. There's all these names for what basically easily described as TSA pre-check, right?
I mean, it's so familiar, and we all have been there.
Yeah, or clear maybe, but yeah. So I think there's a longer version of that, and I do think there's an emergence, and I'm seeing a couple of companies that are doing this. You're seeing teams out of nowhere saying, "Hey, we want to go ahead." In fact, I have a friend who's worked in a bank, large bank, has implemented this model now for almost a year. And he called me the other day. He says, "Oh, I got to tell you, this is so great. The retail group, that we've always been trying to get them to get in on all the stuff we're doing DevOps. They learned about the pack files. Not only did they actually want in, they wanted to do it for APIs.
Nice.
Right, and so they wrote their whole extension of an attestation model for all the things that they required people to have at the bank. The API, it needed doc, it needed certain security, XML, all those things. And they said, "Hey, do you mind just putting this in the project? We wrote it already." Like, wow. When I see things like that happen, I usually get a sense that this is something, this is what happened with DevOps. So early days of DevOps, you didn't have to tell somebody twice.
Yeah, when you hear a story like that, that's very inspiring. Well, it's not just inspiring, but it gives you hope.
Yeah. So the other thing I was interested about, I wasn't normally when I go to DevOps Enterprise Summit. DevOps Enterprise Summit is, for anybody listening, is just a fantastic. I mean, this year, unfortunately, it'll be virtual. Well, at least the London one. Hopefully, maybe we can get back to ground on when we get to November or October. But it's an amazing conference of mostly just enterprises sharing information, banks sharing with other banks. It's an amazing, and Gene did something really spectacular last year. And I know you, and my unfortunate thing is I get so drawn into the hallway tracks that, because I want these people I only see once a year usually. And I didn't get to go to some of the sessions that you were involved with, but you want to talk about the auditors tracks that were pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other detail that may be self-evident, but is worth calling out is, as opposed to maybe like a hardcore engineering or I'll say a technicians conference on DevOps, this is about, the point is for large enterprises to share their stories, right? Because there was that sense originally that, not everybody can do this. This is just for a few, random startups who are very unique, and the business they're in or their growth phase is different enough that it doesn't apply to everybody else. And what Gene did with the DevOps Enterprise Summit was made it so that, no, there's a forum. There's this thing that happens once or twice a year where people in the biggest, most legacy enterprises can come tell their stories. So, kudos to Gene, and I think the community since then, because it's a great event. And to your question, John, of what happened in November, I think it was, in Las Vegas, Gene, again, in his wisdom, I suppose, said, it's one thing for us to talk about performing audit this way, and that even like the most basic assumption of that, can auditors become familiar with DevOps, right? Like, forget about automated governance for a second, but just like DevOps,
just DevOps
as a concept,
because
there's this classic, I think, or stereotype. There's a stereotype that, they're never going to be comfortable with, from a segregation of duties perspective of developers having access to production and all these kind of gotchas, right? That makes us, or makes one, maybe keep certain communities at arm's length, right? i.e. auditors. And so what happened in November is that Gene brought the 4 representatives from each of the big 4 audit shops, like that would be like, PwC, E&Y, Deloitte, and KPMG on stage, and had 2 separate sessions. One of the sessions was in front of the entire gathering. It was essentially, it was very, I'll say, it wasn't even choreographed, but it was like a really great lawyer leading the witness all the way down to get the outcome in front of the jury that he was looking for. And Gene said, the point of the whole thing was, he said, at the end of the day, all 4 representatives on camera in front of hundreds or thousands said, yeah, absolutely, we are comfortable. We think DevOps is okay, right?
That's great. Yeah.
I think that was the big kind of first step was, does anybody think that auditors won't embrace this? And of course, each of these organizations is big, right? The big 4 are thousands of people. So it's not like you can make one statement that
it'd be pretty
everybody in the
dangerous
shop.
for them to say no in front of all those like Nike and B of A and all these monsters.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That'd be bad for business. But so anyways, all of the representatives up there, a colleague of mine from KPMG said, who's now at Capital One, by the way, said, absolutely, like, we recognize that this is the future. And then in a separate session, it was more of an Ask Me Anything. And in that one, it was a more intimate gathering, Chatham House style rules, where nothing would leave the room. But it was essentially like, what would you like to ask, quote unquote, an auditor? Because all of the people who attended that AMA had maybe a friend perhaps who had some nightmares with their product development.
I'm not asking for myself, but a friend of mine.
Yeah, I heard. Anyway, it was great. It was probably about 30 or 40 people who came to that closed door, non-recorded conversation. So,
yeah, that's the one I wish I would have missed. I wish I wouldn't have missed. Another thing that I wanted to pick your brains about. So I wasn't a security person by design. I was DevOps. I got involved in DevOps for networking. So for a while there, I looked like I was a network architect because I could explain SDN all the way through. And then, I met Josh Corman and Shannon Leitz and, really fell in love with this whole idea of these gap. I love these gap areas where there's a big gap between different groups, right? Those are the things that get me interested. So for probably 3 or 4 years now, I've been deeply studying. But I'm not a career person. So in some ways that helps me because I come in with this sort of Pollyanna view. And when I found over the last couple of years, which was amazing to me, and when I talk to security specialists, like, yeah, big deal, which is when I talk to people, they'll use terms like, yeah, we don't tell auditors things they don't already know. Or they'll say, no, we don't add more policy because that's going to add an extra couple of days on the audit. And I'd go running to my security people like, this can't be. How can, this is so broken. Like, isn't the point of governance, risk, and compliance to protect the business and to make like you said, it's about I would say it's not just about reducing risk. Like it's like negative ROI risk. Like, banks get fined. Like that's profit and loss, right? Like, I mean, these are, there are penalties and there are missed opportunities for not making money and anyway, I can go on. But the point is, it blew me away. And what even blew me away more is when I went to tell not Josh and Shannon, but other people, they'd be like, yeah, no, what's wrong with that? I'm like, wow, okay. I guess I really don't understand this part of the business.
Yeah. I mean, in large organizations, I'm sure it's common to any trade group you would talk to, but there's fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Especially in InfoSec where cyber people are often the bad guys, they're the department of no,
right.
So yeah, I think, and there's burnout, right? There's a human cost that a lot of people talk in DevOps circles, right? That's our flavor of burnout. You know, it goes back to like the Phoenix Project and the guy with the binder who did burn out, right? You know, we are so often not welcome in the conversations because people just want to get work done.
Right.
So I'm familiar with the phenomenon you're describing.
Yeah, no, I think it's similar too. I remember talking to another group, and I got everybody in the room. It was, you know, it was risk, it was the development, it was all the teams, and as with value stream mapping, I find that like nobody from risk was ever in stories and requirements and design. I'm like, again, my naivety is like, how could this be? Like, why would you not want risk in requirements and design? And they were actually explaining it was risk when they brought it up, and it was saying, oh yeah, we found out they were using the wrong TLS version, you know, down here just before production.
I was just about to make that exact story. I was like, they know they have to sooner or later before going to prod, or, you know, on some frequency, they have to check in, and they'll do, I say they, and I'm being unfair and stereotyping, but many product teams, and it's not like the product, like the PM's fault, but it's just the way, like, that's always, again, it's the stereotype. It's not an afterthought, but it's the last thing you do right before maybe you got all your feature work done.
Way, right? It's not. It's nobody's fault. It's the design of the system, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very common, and so then you're the bad guy because at the last minute, quote unquote, you threw the wrench in that says, "Wait a second, whoa, you got to get A, B, and C right before we can let this thing go."
And I asked Shannon, like, how, you know, like, and you know, I was just being all sciencey, right? Which is, I was saying, well, I'll tell you, you know, and then the risk people say, yeah, we're not allowed to go. I'm like, you're not allowed to go. I'm like, well, I know how to fix that. Use scientific method here, like PDCA. Like, say, tell management that if you go, things will improve, and start tracking improvement metrics. And then, and if they tell you that they're not willing to accept kind of a scientific method proposal of improvement, you know, then you probably should find another job, right? But and then I was talking to Shannon Leitz, and you know, for those who know Shannon, she's over in Intuit. She's just awesomeness, and she's like, you know, there's a history there, John. Like in the early days, the risk people would go there, and I think you alluded to this, and they kind of got kicked out and became almost folklorish, like, because they would slow things down. They're like, well, you can't do that. Next time, don't invite those people. And then over time, it became, well, we're not allowed to go. You know, so it's
nobody's invited to the party.
That's right. Or even worse, it was they weren't invited, and then it turned into the folklore. It was like, no, risk's not allowed to go to design and requirements. Just the way it is. Why? Well, it's just the way it is. You know.
Yeah. Hey, so I've got a question for you, John.
Sure.
I mean, bringing it back to the automated governance that we started off with, this is something that I think about. It sounds so great, and you know, I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear you share yours on. Well, it sounds great. Everybody, I think, gets it and agrees. But why isn't everybody doing this? What's the biggest constraint?
So I think the first problem is, you know, my first answer would be like, I don't know, they're all crazy, right? No, but to be realistic, is the terms are all overloaded. This is a really dangerously overloaded terminology. I don't know how many people I've talked to, like, John, why are you doing that? Oh, can you show me what you're doing? And basically what they show me is they're using like Black Duck and they're scanning.
And that's their definition of automated governance.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I mean, and I'm not exaggerating here, right? Like they're doing scanning and even simple forms of static, you know, and they went from, you know, and I think sometimes, you know, the problem, I'm very guilty of this, right? Like, a lot of times people will explain to you complex things, and the first thing you'll do is you'll start to figure out, what do I know that they're telling me? And the danger sometimes is like, oh, I understand it. And it sort of, you shut out. So I think a lot of it is overloaded terminology, abstraction, and you know, even policy as code. I can't tell you how many people say, oh, we got policy as code. I'm like, where's the code? You know, I mean, you know, whether it's YAML files or Gherkin, I mean, you know, the idea that, I mean, because one of the things is it's immutable. Like, this is like if you want to know, like, there's one of these banks has created this replay option, and there's all these side benefits. So now the pack file has basically a pneumatic, a service definition, and a version, right? And that becomes the pack file that gets loaded into source control.
Yep.
And so basically when you have you have a whole bunch of commits as evidence, but then at some point you have the pull request and the merge. That's the identification of that change. And so now you have this beautiful like immutability in that I can go back and tell you exactly what the policy was. Because the nature of how Git or GitHub works, right? I can pull up the exact version of that policy definition that was defined and committed. I get the commit ID from the policy people who wrote it. I have true immutability of the person in charge of defending and organizing policy or group to the policy that was injected as part of the delivery of that merge request with all the commits, all the way into production. I have a complete chain of evidence that ties me all the way to, now that to me is policy as code, right? And where now I've got complete, now I don't need a screen print. I take the policy definition and I connect it to the digitally signed SHA.
Right, and then the software bill of materials, all that great stuff.
How that could be broken, then like we can debate a lot more chaos if somebody's going to basically break, or say encryption, right? Yeah. But yeah, I do think that it's one of those ideas that you have to sort of, it's a show me. Like when you start, I think one of the things we're going to do is we've decided that we're going to do a version 2 of this guide. Yeah. Because the version 2, and we're going to focus on just policy. The whole discussion is going to be about policy. What does it mean? How do you manifest it? How does it sort of in a version 2 referenceable back to the original document make sense when you think of it from policy? And I think at that point, maybe it'll be easier to hand somebody that guide and say, this is what we're talking about, and here are all the side benefits.
Yeah. I think I know what you may answer based on what you just said, but I'm going to ask my question in a little bit different way.
Sure.
Which is, my question was, why isn't everybody doing this? And if you have to, I'm going to give you 3 options, which are predictable coming from somebody who works at a big 4, but is the biggest constraint people, process, or technology?
Okay. It's definitely not technology, right? Because there's a little bit of uplift to do this stuff, but it's not, right? It really isn't technology. And I guess I would argue, so I'd almost take it in reverse order. The technology is the easiest part. The second easiest part is the process, because there is some abstraction and things that you have to change with that middle go between people and technology, which is process, right? So there are some things I have to change in terms of how we do business.
Yep.
So it's a little harder than the technology. The technology part is not harder than this at all. It's, depending on how you set up. In fact, most people who are using now are just using enforcer models. So you throw, and I know this is going to sound more harder, but you throw sort of Kafka around it. If you're actually working with Kubernetes, you use OPA. So there's, the CNCF OPA with the Rego language. And so like the technology is all sitting there. You have guaranteed delivery buff transport with something like Kafka. The process you have to get sort of, depending on how many pipelines you have, if you have 30 different pipelines, you probably, this isn't going to work out real well. But if you've narrowed it down to 3 or 4, then, then abstracting this sort of technology on those process pipelines. So yeah, the answer definitely is people. And it is, and then I'll go back to, I think the only malleable way to create mass change in most organizations is you have to have a carrot and stick, an emergent model that we talked about earlier. But people is definitely going to be the hardest part.
That would have been my answer too. I mean, earlier in the call, we were talking about how there's people who aren't invited to conversations, right? Because of these beliefs about how much friction they'll add. If that's not a signal that we have a people problem, like a culture problem.
Well, just risk people saying, I don't tell auditors things they don't already know, right? Like that's as broken as it gets.
Yeah.
I've gone back to CIOs and they're like, how do we do, John? I'm like, terrible.
Yeah.
What do you mean, John? I'm like, well, do you want some examples?
Yep.
That your audits are theater. I had a large bank. I'll just say it's a UK large bank where these young gentlemen were working on really exotic stuff. They had built one of the fastest growing apps in UK on the iPhone and smart device and all this. And they were really scared about, this is a very traditional bank, about what if they got audited. So they called the auditors in. And the auditors come in, and the first thing they say is like, what would happen if we got audited? And they're like, the auditors, classic auditors, like, we don't know. We'd have to audit you. God, thanks, buddy. So then they flipped it to say, okay, what do you look for? And they listed like 4 or 5 things. And what they realized, it scared them to death. None of those 4 or 5 things showed any evidence to what they were doing. One was it had to be the service owner defined by the CI and the CMDB. But good luck with this particular bank, the CI was basically the Amazon account.
Yep.
For anything that happened on Amazon, it was like one account, and the person who set up the account was the service owner, who may have been finance or the person with the first credit card or whatever. The second was the time window. There's no time window. The third was the back out plan. I mean, they were in a cloud native, modernization, like none of those. And what they realized, in fact, one of the things they realized is even their Jenkins logs, they were rotating every 5 weeks. So they were realizing after 5 weeks, there was zero evidence of anything that they did.
Wow.
If anything, that could have, 6 weeks later, there would be no evidence in that bank of any bad actor activity in that process. So one of the things they did is like they were still scared to death, but they basically started archiving Jenkins logs just in case. I mean, that's how ugly it is out there right now.
I agree. I mean, I love these conversations when we get together because it makes you excited for the future when things will work right, quote unquote right. I'm sure there'll be new challenges then as well, but it's a little bit like when we, some long time ago now in the tech world, when we said, God, the promise of the cloud will change everything. Some of the things we're talking about have the potential to change just about everything, and in terms of the speed and cost of risk reduction for business, enabling, like we said at the very beginning, growth and innovation that benefits everybody.
Right. But then even then, like, my good friend Chris Brown, I worked with Chef, he was the original developer of EC2. I think he's back at Amazon again, but he talked about the oxygen in the balloon, right? You're just moving the oxygen in the balloon, right? Because what are some of the biggest attack vectors now that are in the cloud? The configuration definition, right? Yep. So we've libraries and bad libraries, that's always going to exist, dependencies and dependency mess, but the whole new set of attack vectors are YAML files. And, speaking of YAML files, Kubernetes configuration definitions and, all these things are just new, like, severe attack vectors, misconfigured or not even like maliciously, or just unknown. You copy and paste something that works and you don't realize there's like 4 other stanzas in there that are like permissive, so
it's a funny way to maybe circle back and bring this around is there's services out there, like especially for like AWS and Azure right now, that aim to unify policy into code, right? I think that it's not a newsflash to either of those service providers that this is a challenge and is a big detriment, or it presents friction to their own business, right? When the more fear or risk averse large enterprises are, because it's so easy sometimes to foot gun yourself, when they make it easy to make policy into code and apply it across a subscription, for example, sign me up, take my money if you're going to make it that easy. So I expect we're going to see a lot of focus into like frameworks like PCI, for example. What does it mean to do PCI in the cloud in an AWS or Azure? And here's the list of things. Here's all of your infrastructure and how you're doing against that. Like, it's actually, the type of immutable artifacts that you were talking about along the way here of attestation that you can just hand over to an auditor. Like, that's getting closer, right?
Yeah. No, I think, we've only a little bit of time left, but that was the project on the ONUG project, and then you get to see, which was the automated cloud governance, which was a working paper with Cigna, Kaiser Permanente, B of A, CPMC, and FedEx, basically. And the idea was to ask the cloud providers for attestations from them to the tenants, and in a uniform format. And everybody said we were crazy when we started, and I kept defending. I was the chair of the project, and I said, no, stop. We're not going to. This paper is not asking the cloud providers to do this. We're not that naive. What we're going to do is ask the community to sanction this paper, and then if we have, we probably had, I think, in terms of just IT buying, purchasing, power in that just that working group had to be $50 billion, right? And then you reach out, and that's like 6 or 7 companies. Then you reach out to another 100, you're at $1 trillion. So the goal was to get the rest of the community excited and then say, could we have a conversation, ask the cloud providers to show attestations of what they do in a unified format.
Yep.
And the paper went live like last week. The Wall Street Journal did an article on it, and we're starting a second rev. And guess who's showing up for the second rev? 2 of the top 5 cloud providers.
Congrats. That's a big deal.
So I'm not saying we still got the guarantee of unified information, but things that cloud providers do that are hidden to tenants.
Yep.
I'll put a link or something to the presentation, but it's 3 asks of the cloud providers saying, if you could just unified give us this kind of stuff, we'd have a better sense of a trusted model from what you're delivering us.
Yep.
So, that's going to happen either whether it's community push or it just makes sense, or, just in general. I think you start taking the DevOps automated governance. If you think about all delivery pipelines with attestation models, that's a normalized, unified way to get evidence, regardless of whether you're on cloud, you're on a PaaS, you're on bare metal. It's going to work the same. And then you start talking about the cloud providers. I know some of the GovCloud stuff that's they're asking for that kind of stuff. So that's happening. Sure. And then what we did in ONUG, so it all sort of becomes a primordial soup at some point, where we do get this stuff better. Our businesses are more aligned with our risk.
Yep.
Our GRC should be aligned in being profitable and successful and non-liable companies, right?
Many exciting things on the way.
Yeah. All right, my friend, this is fun. TechStrong. We'll see how this pops up, and we'll have more conversations. It's been fun getting to know you, and and I appreciate you asking me questions because makes me feel like I'm actually playing a security person on TV very well.
Yeah, you do.
Did I do it okay?
Thanks, John. It's always great to talk with you.
Same here. Take care, buddy.
Okay, great stuff there from back in TechStrong Con. Now it's time for our news headline roundup of our media ops sites. As I always say, please, there's so much more out there than just these couple headlines I give you. Do check out DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard for a full roundup of what's news and what's happening out there. But for today, let's hit a couple. First of all, over on Container Journal, our friends at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation have had Contour Ingress Controller as an incubation project. They just keep graduating and taking more projects in there. CNCF's doing a great job. Secondly, the folks at Kubler, they're always something happening at Kubler, it seems. Kubler extends Kubernetes cluster management reach. Great stuff there. Over on Security Boulevard, we have F5, Big IP. Geez, I haven't heard that referenced in a long time. Has huge, enormous, bad, scary security holes. Patch it now. Ooh. Well, I guess that's why we haven't heard about it in a long time. But if you are, and there's plenty of you out there who are running Big IP, make sure you patch it. Sounds like that's something that's being exploited right now. Threat intelligence in a big data world, and big data is a double-edged sword for threat intelligence. It gives us so much access to all of this data, but providing, doing the analysis on it is why you pay for threat intelligence. Also up on the boulevard, we have Order Out of Chaos, tackling phishing attacks. Good subject. I was just thinking, we've been seeing more and more phishing here at Media Ops even. So I assume if we are, you are too. My advice to you is make sure your team is up and how to defend against phishing, spear phishing, etc. Also on Security Boulevard, bolstering corporate security post-COVID. I think this is a subject that a lot of organizations are facing as a result of COVID. What's changing technology-wise? We're all remote. We are working more and more on SaaS-based stuff, cloud-based stuff, and this is going to change. I had this conversation. We have a new a new show, weekly or bi-weekly episode coming up on TechStrong TV as well as standalone called CISO Talk or CISO Talk. And it features the CISO over at Unisys, Matt Newfield. And, we had this discussion with Matt yesterday about what's changing for the security, for corporate security as a result of COVID going forward. And it's a reset in a lot of ways. So, and check out CISO Talk. We'll give you more information about it as we get closer to launch. Also, over on DevOps.com, though, there's a bunch of good articles up there. First of all, can NetOps and SecOps finally get along? It's so funny to me because to me, so much of what I learned about in security came out of networking and NetOps. So it should have always gotten along, but it actually hasn't, obviously. But a good article on this, and check it out. Next, cloud is red hot in the COVID-19 era. No, that's a Captain Obvious one, huh? And it obviously is, but read the article. We also have Keysight Technologies jumps into app testing by acquiring Eggplant. Eggplant was a great app testing product, and I thought it was open source. So now we have Keysight on top of it. And, again, we see a lot going on with testing. Let me just give you a quick plug for another regular feature we're going to have here on TechStrong TV coming up. All, by the way, comes out of the Digital Anarchist relaunch, or the Digital Anarchist 2.0. And it's called DevOps Unbound. It's sponsored by our friends at Tricentis. And while it will tackle DevOps and enterprise DevOps issues, there is going to be an emphasis on testing and app testing, code testing, all the different flavors of testing. And so we're going to dive a little deeper into that in the weeks and months ahead. Also up on DevOps.com, though, let me also mention VMware. You got to give them credit. They are doing everything they can to get into this DevOps space and be a player. They acquired a company called Blue Medora, and it advances, they're a player in AI ops. And it's a happening area within DevOps, obviously. And we'll see how VMware, expands in there. And I don't think that's the last we're going to hear from VMware either. Anyway, that's the news for today, July 9th. Now it's time to go over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has a great interview with one of the Forrester analysts. And then we'll be giving us a preview of some of the fantastic webinars we have coming up here on Media Ops. So Charlene, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I'm here now with Janan Budge, who is a Principal Analyst at Forrester, and I am so excited to be having this conversation with you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me, Charlene.
So you guys recently put out a report called Maintain Your Security Edge, Develop and Retain Cybersecurity Talent. And that is a great topic that I think a lot of our viewers are really going to get a lot out of if we talk a little bit about the report's findings, and specifically as it relates to corporate culture in finding and securing and retaining that cybersecurity talent. So thanks again for taking a few minutes. I wonder if we can maybe kind of start out with the whole idea of finding good cybersecurity people. I mean, why is it so difficult to find them? And then after the companies do find them, why is it so difficult to keep them?
Did you ever stumble across some of the research by my colleagues, Jeff Pollard, Chase Cunningham, Joseph Blankenship, called Reverse Cybersecurity's Self-Inflicted Staffing Shortage?
Probably sometime along my.
It was really good. It was quite recent, and it was really, really cool because there were, I think, the first folks who called out a little bit of BS on that whole, we are facing a horrible skills shortage in cybersecurity. And they called at least part of this as being self-inflicted, actually. We want to pay peanuts for these amazing people who are doing incredible things, not just for our organizations, actually, but for society, for democracy, for all of us. We want to pay them very little. We are very narrow in the pool that we look into. We are all well aware of the diversity issues that we face in our field, lots and lots of different reasons. So, the hiring side is a little bit of a schmozzle to start with. And once you hire people, and look, I've been in cybersecurity for 22 years, embarrassingly, I think a long time before it was called cybersecurity. And one of the things that I do know, both as a hiring manager and as somebody who has held jobs in the field, it is hard to find people, but retaining them and building a culture where security teams are happy just seems to be task impossible, actually. And that's why I hooked into this research with my colleague Heidi Shea, who was writing about the skills side of things and what kinds of skills should we be hiring for and building. And I'm like, hey, look, we need to talk about culture. We need to talk about retaining people beyond offering them skills and beyond offering them a salary.
Makes a lot of sense. We hear a lot about, to your point, the fact that organizations can't find the right people. But I wonder if it's actually more of an issue of they can't keep the right people because their culture just doesn't support perhaps folks who may not be in cybersecurity but have an interest in it. They don't really advance those people over into security to kind of grow into those positions. Is that something that you're seeing organizations maybe considering as they look at their shortage of cybersecurity folks and really look for ways to fill the gaps that they do have?
Absolutely. I think expanding some of the skills that we are looking at as an industry has become absolutely paramount. In fact, when I speak at keynotes to people like customer experience and digital professionals, my closing is almost always, we need everybody on board. We need human behavior skills. We need psychology skills. We need those with comms, with marketing background, behavior science, all sorts of things need to go into this because the attackers are obviously extremely clever and creative, and we're certainly not responding to that. Again, we keep on going for a particularly narrow pool. And then when you think about it, from an organizational perspective, we are trying to build security programs that engage the organization, that bust through the politics of organizations. If you are recruiting somebody with a technical computer science or cybersecurity background, they're not necessarily going to be the person who's going to be able to push that change through. They've got another really important job to do. So we need all sorts of people, and we are absolutely seeing progressive CISOs and progressive organizations think about that. Thank goodness.
So in the whole application development space, we're talking a lot more about the quote unquote soft skills that engineers need to have to be able to really progress in their jobs and advance themselves in their companies, and those soft skills being communication and effective management skills and things of that nature. And it sounds like cybersecurity really needs to have a lot of those soft skills as well.
Absolutely. And, I know about 10 years ago, we were talking a lot, again, thank goodness, about the importance of things like communication and engagement, and they're very important. And I think the conversation has progressed in security to extend to things like negotiation skills, because you need to do that. You need to do that internally within the organization. You might possibly need to do it externally with attackers. You need to do it externally with your suppliers. For the Chief Information Security Officer, we are now starting to talk about the harder soft skills actually, or the superpowers of empathy, the superpowers of vulnerability. These are really tough things. Again, if you have come from a particular discipline, these are really difficult things for us to get our heads around, but they can be tangible, and they are absolutely the key between success and failure. And certainly when we're talking about this conversation of maintaining talent, of keeping people happy, as a leader, how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that if you're not empathetic, if you don't show vulnerability, if you don't listen? I had a CIO say to me that her biggest skill is, what does she call it? She said, I listen with an open heart and open ears. And I'm like, that is so cool. And again, such a far departure from when I entered the profession, when it was, perhaps management was something quite different.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we always hear about is, the organizations that are doing what they think is right to help keep their employees happy through learning, e-learning, and ways to advance their careers, but they don't really focus on other things culture-wise that would compel, I think would be a lot more compelling for employees. So, what are some of the things maybe that organizations really need to be focusing on to help keep the right security talent, or just the right talent in general, to help keep them on board and not, wanting to move to a bigger, better company?
Yeah, and I love that point that you made, and we definitely in that research with Heidi, she focused very much on the skills development, and we both sat in on each other's research interviews, and it was so important. It's such an important area of investment. So, but also you have to, as you said, you have to offer something different, and even things like remuneration. It's important in attracting talent, but once you've attracted that talent, it kind of, I'm making that salary now, I'm expecting it, that's not going to keep me. So then we've got to move beyond those financial rewards. And one of the first things that came out from our research is making work-life flexibility a retention priority. And it's really interesting because we obviously did this research before the pandemic, and now work-life flexibility is it's something else. It's a reality for almost everybody. But in the before, and I think in the after, actually, at all times, it's so important to offer flexible work arrangements and promote them. So many organizations did not do that before. And work with HR to explore meaningful benefits to your people. And one of the very interesting for me, because I'm in Australia, as you can tell by my accent, and I work with a lot of people from India and Singapore and Asian countries. If anybody is listening there, hello. One of the things that I know is that benefits in some countries are not benefits in other countries. So healthcare for you guys in the US is a really important employee benefit. Not so much for me in Australia. We have, we have free healthcare basically by our governments. So work out with HR what's going to be meaningful from a benefits perspective. And flexibility. I cannot talk about the importance of this enough. With regards to flexibility, I was talking to a CISO the other day, and this is in the after once COVID hit us and everybody started working from home. It's like, thank goodness I've been working with my company for so long to allow us to work from home. And what he is now doing is he's working with his staff. He's teaching them to work out their body's productivity rhythms and work according to their productivity, not according to whatever hours the organization dictates. So for me, that's really cool. I want to talk about a good team culture. And a good team culture extends, I think one of my colleagues wrote, it's not just about ping pong tables. That's not what it's about. Bringing fun, humor, communication to the workplace, when you're hiring, hire based on culture fit, hire based on trust that comes up obviously over and over and over again, not just technical skills. And I often wonder if so many people say that, why doesn't it actually happen in reality? It's really interesting. Building a good team culture, enrich the team with diversity, obviously, that will absolutely change the entire dynamics of the team and make it a lot more compelling, not just for women and minorities, but for everybody, actually, because we all know that a diverse team is an excellent team in so many different measurements. And obviously, rewarding the right behavior, talking about the right behaviors and rewarding them.
It's interesting. You brought up the idea of inclusiveness and diversity, and it's something that in IT we've been talking about for years, especially with regards to diversity, women in IT and minorities in IT, and but I don't think a lot of people are actually talking about. In security or even in IT in general, just the other group that is often underrepresented, which is the those who have are in a wheelchair or have a particular handicap. I don't really like to use that term, but that they are sometimes overlooked for jobs because of their differing abilities, if you will. And I wonder, in security, are we seeing any changes in that area in terms of diversity and inclusiveness? And if not, is that something that the conversation really needs to be had?
It's interesting. So, no, to be 100% honest, I'm not hearing it. That does not mean it does not exist. Where I am hearing a lot of diversity outside of the traditional modalities of diversity that we talk about is actually neurodiversity. And I welcome that. I think it's about time. I think it's about time society as a whole embrace neurodiversity. And I think in security specifically, again, we need lots of different parts of our brains working together on this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really fascinating. But along with that, we do kind of thrive on a culture of what has been kind of a traditional white male hierarchy, if you will. And so there are certain expectations in the workplace sometimes that still kind of filter through because of that legacy hierarchy. So, I imagine that could breed certain, I don't know, I hesitate to use the word toxic, but it can actually breed a toxic culture based on norms and ideas that have kind of filtered down through just so many generations. And as a female in IT, I've certainly had my share of those incidences. But how can organizations kind of help their employees or even and their managers to kind of move beyond that kind of fallback culture, if you will, and really show a more kind of open-minded, broader view of what the quote unquote average employee should look like, and how they should be worked with and respected and
yeah. Look, I mean, we should have a whole other discussion on
we should do an entire
diversity.
Webinar. Yeah.
But we must, and we absolutely must, because I think it is the most important thing, the most important issue that is facing us right now. I mean, what is this 9% female participation in security? It is not sustainable. There are so many amazing women here. But I do want to talk about toxicity for a minute. So part of doing that research on, create a good culture and that was really cool and I loved it. But I did, I had to niggle about toxic work cultures. And I'm like, what? Because I felt like so many security teams I've been part of, I've seen it's just impossible to stay. There's just this, and you don't stay not just because they haven't created a great culture, but actually it's just gross to be there. You just want to, you just want to have a shower at the end of the day and wash it all off. So I'm like, what is the cause of that? So we asked the question in the interviews, got great responses, and then I put up the question on my LinkedIn. And we had 200 comments. I went out for lunch, came back, 200 comments. People,
wow.
It made me realize everybody is an expert. There were 27,000 views. And so many, to your point about diversity, in my direct messages, there were tens and tens of women writing to me about their experiences with toxic culture and why they left. And that was actually, that is something I'd like to talk about one day. I'd like to write about. I haven't quite found the right words to be able to have that conversation respectfully yet. But in terms of the causes of toxicity, so we decided to analyze that. And for security, ego was in the top 10, the presence of ego. So back to your point, a particular genre that we tend to attract, but not only attract, and this is where, shame on leadership, but we keep it, we leave it, and ego is not necessarily a bad thing. Everybody, we all have egos, but there is ego, and then there's that ego that stems from really low self-esteem, fear, the need to be right. There was another one that came out that, saying that I loved is completely wrong, but it was just so interesting. The hero complex. Some people called it the Messiah complex, the rock stars, the bros, the invincibles, the know-it-alls, the brilliant jerk. And it's like, oh my God. And all of this led back to, okay, there is in leadership insecurity generally. One of the top causes, again, was low leadership maturity. So you get promoted to be a security leader. You've not often been trained in the softer skills. You have not often been trained in leading people. Poor communication skills of the leader. They are not able to communicate the vision, the mission. They've not been able to build the team bind. All sorts of things go into this phenomenon. So it was quite harrowing research to write. And then, in terms of to address it, then it is actually first and foremost, you've got to correct toxicity. It is, you can't, and I think what, in my experience, the security people that I've met and worked with around the world are absolutely, absolutely brilliant and kind and quite often introverts. So, we do have a tendency to bury our heads in the sand and hope this will go away. It does not go away. You cannot sleepwalk into culture. You just can't do it. You've got to create a culture, and that means you've got to deal with negative things, understand people's perspectives, fix that hero complex, set a good example for your people, and sometimes you've just got to make some tough calls.
Yeah. It sounds like it's a problem that is pervasive, not just in cybersecurity, but really in all areas of business. So, but it's really fascinating stuff. So the report is it's available on the Forrester website, right? Is it a pay for report?
It is. So it's for Forrester clients. It is for Forrester clients, but we try and blog as much of as we can, particularly for topics like this, and particularly for the toxic work culture. I did actually share the top 10 just because I had so much community contributions. So I always, want to contribute back. And this conversation is part of my contribution back.
Excellent. Well, so there's definitely a blog on the Forrester website then that you could check out. What's the name of that blog? Do you remember? Has something to do with the brilliant jerk, right?
Don't reward the brilliant jerk.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so look that up on the Forrester
not
website.
My idea, but yeah.
It's a very catchy title for sure. So,
Yeah.
Well, Janan, thank you very much for taking the time and talking with me.
Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right. We could have this conversation for hours and hours and hours, and probably never really come to any particular conclusion. But it's definitely a conversation worth having. So, thanks again for your time, and I'm sure we'll be circling back another time for a discussion on the workplace and cybersecurity, and maybe hopefully how far we've come.
Yeah, he's hoping. Thank you. That's so
I'm an optimist there.
Let's do it.
All right, sounds great. But yeah, thanks again. I do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Strong TV. I am Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am here with your weekly webinar preview. Let's see, today is Thursday, so we are going to take a look at some of the webinars that are happening early next week. We've got a full palette next week, so hopefully you guys will block out a lot of time on your schedules for our webinars, because we got a ton of them coming up, folks. Our first one is that I want to talk about is happening Monday, July 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It is called Real Life, Implementing Value Stream Mapping, and it is sponsored by Plutora. Our buddy Jeffrey Kais from Plutora and Helen Beal, who is, she's a strategic advisor at the DevOps Institute. She's also a self-professed DevOpsologist. They're going to be offering up a live value stream mapping exercise, which will show firsthand how to automate baseline metrics and demonstrate how teams can actually use value stream management to inspect and adapt. This is a very, very interesting demo. It's totally worthwhile. If you've ever had any questions about value stream mapping, value stream management in general, this webinar is the one for you. So please check it out. Our second one is also happening on Monday, July 13th. This one is happening at 1 p.m. Eastern. It's on Security Boulevard, and it is called Achieving the Optimal Application Security Posture Across the Enterprise, and it's sponsored by Signal Sciences. Now, this one is actually really interesting because it's focusing on web application security, which is especially relevant today in our pandemic work from home environment, where employees are accessing corporate networks and corporate files using the web a lot of times. And the webinar kind of focuses on the security implications of that, and then how web application firewalls, easy for me to say, can actually help keep that sensitive data secure. Our third webinar today that I want to talk about is happening Tuesday, July 14th at 11 a.m. This one is sponsored by Digital AI, and it is called Future Proof Your Digital Transformation. This one is also happening on DevOps.com.
It's another super relevant topic for our times. More organizations are ramping up their digital transformation efforts in light of the pandemic, as they really just want to maintain productivity and keep their business humming during these troubling times. So we've got Andreas Preens from Digital AI, who's going to be talking about how he's going to actually offer up some real world insights on how to plan and coordinate and get visibility into how your digital transformation efforts are going and progressing at scale. So definitely, if you are at any point in your digital transformation efforts, this is absolutely a webinar I would suggest you take the time out to watch. As always, our webinars are offered both live and on demand on the respective websites. And we have a ton of other webinars that are upcoming as well as on demand. So please check out devops.com, check out Security Boulevard, check out Container Journal for a listing of all of the websites or webinars that we have available. But until then, I wish you all happy viewing, and please, as always, stay safe.
Hey, thanks, Charlene. Great interview with Forrester, as well as a great webinar preview. Now it's time for the Analyst Corner with Mitch. And as I mentioned, Mitch's topic today is there such thing as a career path anymore? And there's not. I mean, I think people are more likely to just take a different job than they are to continue at one place. I think people today have had, or in the workforce today, are going to wind up having multiple different careers over the course of their working lifetime. But I don't want to steal Mitchell's thunder. He'll tell you all about it. Let's now go to Mitch Ashley.
Hi, I'm Mitch Ashley, CEO of the Accelerated Strategies Group, and welcome to Analyst Corner. So I have a question for you. Is there such thing as a career path anymore? I know when I started my career, there was a definite thought of the process that you go through. You're a junior this, you maybe start in testing, or junior developer, or whatever the progression might look like in your particular field in technology. And I would pose to the question, the answer to the question is no, there actually aren't career paths, not in the way we thought about them as formal linear processes. And maybe that's the big difference. As I work with individuals and teams over time, certainly this fluidity of people's career has changed. And I think that's part of the reason why leaders struggle with how to hire people, because it's always been this goal of find the best person that checks off the most skills of what you need, hopefully all of them, and then keep them for as long as you can, because you don't want to go through that hiring process again. And I would pose to you, we need just the opposite skill, that the workforce is going to be, and is already, much more fluid. People expect to work in a job year and a half, 2 years, maybe 3. They're not going to be there 20 years or 10 years in most cases. They're looking for opportunities. They're looking for meaningful work, but they're looking for the kind of work that's fulfilling to them and maybe on a next step or two in their career. Part of that career path mentality is having a progression for people to advance in. And I think those structures are probably still helpful in some climates, but I think the workforce is thinking at it as an opportunity for them to take a next step or a series of next steps in their career. And that may take a weaving path, not a straight path in many cases. And I'll give you an example why. Some of the folks that I've worked with recently are folks straight out of school, maybe with a master's degree, a business degree, undergrad degree. And by the way, they're some of the best people I've worked with. I just can't tell you how much I enjoy working with these folks. They are just some of the coolest people. And some of the fascinating things that I find about working with folks coming out of school in the last couple of years is, number one, they're fearless about technology. There is no fear. There is no sense of, I don't know if I can figure that out. Let me be careful about saying I might be interested in that. It's kind of like, hey, I learned the last thing, I can learn the next thing, right? It's another tool. It's another technology. And while, we're not going from software to brain surgery or to nuclear physicists, it's not that big of a leap. But if I learned a visual graphics tool, maybe I can learn a video tool. Then beyond that, and it's probably going to leverage some of the same things that I used in one tool from another. Or maybe I know in sound engineering, and I'm going to do some video work just to pick something. Could be different languages, containers, different tools that we use in the software world. And I think that approach to technology and that fearlessness, that sense of my role is to learn things, not to follow a path. And my ability to learn things will take me on a journey. And I'm looking for opportunities and people that can help me get there and give me some guidance along the way. Not to do it for me, not to figure it out for me. I want to figure that out myself. And that mentality, that belief system is something that is pretty fundamentally different than certainly when I started my career. I remember a point in time where I worked with a team. I took over a team that first week leading the team in a new job, new company, someone came in my office, closed the door, back when I had an office with a door, and at a pretty emotional conversation, had just realized that the conversation this person had with his father wasn't true anymore. His father had given him the guidance of go work for this kind of a company. You'll have a 25-year career. You'll have a pension. You'll be done. You'll be able to go do the next thing or take time off or whatever. And 10 years into it, poof, everything changed. There is no lifetime employment anymore. It's kind of hard for me to believe you even say that term anymore. But at the time I thought, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I don't know what you mean, lifetime employment. It was kind of foreign to me back then, and I'm talking quite a while ago. Now it's the journey that you want to be on, and create your path and look for the people that are going to help you to be on your way. So as I pose that question, you may have a very different view. You may see it as there's lots of structure to career paths, and that may very well be the case, just different experiences that we have. But I would contend that it would be helpful for all of us to rethink that model. And it may be true today. It may not be as true as we think it is. And thinking about this kind of 180 of everyone has their own career path. And our role as leaders is to, number one, help them grow. Number two is help achieve those goals. Number three, which probably should be number one, is really know the person well enough so that you know one and two. Because if you don't know those things when they walk in your door and say, I'm going to leave and work for Facebook or LinkedIn or this startup or this company over here, you're going to wonder why. And you probably would have known they were going to go there at a minimum if you'd had those conversations. So easy to say, but I do put that kind of investment, or I certainly try to, with the folks that I work with. So the first question I ask every person that I meet on the team that I'm going to work with is like, why are you here? What do you want to do? What's interesting about your current job, and what do you like to do that you're not doing yet? It doesn't matter if it's 3 or 5 years down the field. It could be right now. So I wish you the best in your journey. Feel free to reach out, Mitchell at accelst.com. If you'd like to talk about this, take care.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue, or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
All right. Our last session today is our channel roundup, and it features the one and only Mike Vizard and his trusted sidekick, Frank. Well, he's more than a sidekick. Frank's a pretty bright guy. But it's Mike and Frank Olhurst on the channel roundup. Let's go over now to Mike and Frank.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, Thanks for having us back on the show as always. I'm Mike Vizard. This is Frank Olhorst.
Hey, how's everybody doing today?
All right. Hey, Frank, Zoom has some hardware. I was kind of taken aback and a little surprised by that, but it's hardware as a service. So now you can basically buy this thing on a monthly basis. What do you think that means for channel partners? Are they going to like this? Are they going to hate it? Or, is this just kind of a toy?
I think potentially they're going to like it because this kind of brings the hardware back into the conference room as opposed to, everybody working on their individual PCs and things like that, allowing perhaps, the channel partners out there to get involved with building video conferencing rooms or, conference rooms that support video conferencing using Zoom's hardware. And so I think it becomes something that not only they can, sell as a service, but also kind of handle the setup and the maintenance and things like that, and probably get involved with designing video conferencing systems a little more aggressively than they can right now.
Yeah, it seems like for a while that was big business for the partners, and there were all these video conferencing systems that people were building out, and then they got too complex to use, and nobody set them up, or actually you had to have a dedicated administrator for these things. So is this something that may go mainstream in your mind?
Possibly. I mean, Zoom brings a lot of simplicity to the equation. I mean, pretty much anybody is able to use Zoom without too much difficulty. And if you extend that into, dedicated hardware, it means that you could just drop one of these systems in place and give somebody a quick lesson and they're good to go. And then, of course, you can bundle on other things around it. Whether it is, design of the conference room or the maintenance or upgrades or, setting it up to host multiple conference rooms. So I think there's, plenty of meat there for the channel to get involved with if they're creative about the deployment end of it. The one thing that might be a challenge is that if Zoom makes it too simple to use.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if there's money in it for the partners or if there's going to be more like a consulting gig around. But do you think that they can actually make any money selling Zoom hardware, or how will they monetize this thing?
I think it's going to be the consulting around it. We'd really have to look at what Zoom is going to try and do channel-wise when it comes down to it. And if Zoom is also going to kind of get involved with the whole concept of Zoom certified hardware, not just hardware as a service from them, but, some of these more higher end conferencing systems. If they can bring simplicity to that, I think that becomes a real good way for the channel to get involved.
All right. Well, Zoom has definitely transformed the way we communicate with each other, and there probably would be no work from home movement without Zoom. So maybe we'd all be back in the office a lot faster. So let's hope that there's something good to come out of this on the hardware side.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Speaking of services, Cato Networks. Not necessarily a household name, but they have this SD-WAN service, and they have now hired their first channel chief, and now they've got a little certification program to go with that. The idea is that they want not just agents, but people who will actually resell this SD-WAN service. It has points of presence in, say, 50 POPs. And when I think about SD-WANs, it kind of started out as a hardware-based thing, right? You were supposed to buy a bunch of boxes and deploy them and manage them yourselves. Do you think that SD-WANs are really going to take off as a service? And if I do have SD-WANs, do I need that stinking VPN anymore?
I've covered Cato quite a bit during their journey and their move towards normalizing a technology called SASE, or Secure Access at the Service Edge, where they kind of eliminate a lot of the hardware concerns around deploying an SD-WAN. And what they've also done is that they've kind of flattened the security stack and the networking stack into kind of a single, easy to manage element, so that you can have secure connections to these points of presence. And they're also, kind of deploying a client that can run on endpoints that use a zero trust network access to connect into the network. So yes, they can very much well make VPNs go away. And they can bring a higher level of security to those that want to use SD-WANs. There's a whole bunch of other things built into the technology as well, such as advanced routing, failover, and the list goes on. And the way they've set this up is that you put, a device, kind of like a router, if you will, which you connect in onto your local network, which then works over the public internet to connect you into the SD-WAN service. And with all these points of presences, they can further then connect into, cloud service providers or to your other locations. So it's an interesting way of creating an isolated network environment with a bunch of failover capability and security over the public internet without exposing anything. I think there's a huge potential for this on two fronts. One is that it solves many of the security issues around SD-WAN, and it's something that of a challenge for the channel in the past that has been dealing with SD-WAN has always had to add further things on top of SD-WAN to better secure it. And I think it also takes away the angst of VPNs. So, if you're a channel partner and you can become an agent, if you will, selling this service, I think there's a huge potential for you to really bring into your service area a bunch of these distributed type clients and customers, or folks that are heavily invested in cloud services and want to make sure it's secure and available to mobile endpoints as well. So it addresses a lot of things. What it really is going to come down to is the value that's offered, and that's still something that has to be determined.
I think one of the big pushes that they're onto here is they want the partners to take the paper on this network sale, as it were, and not just be an agent. I think it'll be interesting to see if you can resell an entire service and own the paper on it, because then you get equity in your company. I think if you're an agent, it's very difficult for a channel partner to sell a company that's based on solely an agent-based model, because essentially, the people buying it or the banks that looks to fund it will view it much like, an insurance agent and give it that level of value. And I think a lot of the partners are often hesitant about becoming agents because of that reason. So do you think that there is room to resell an actual service?
Well, I guess a lot of that comes down to how they define their channel program. I know there was talk about them allowing, their partners to rebrand or at least co-opt the branding name so that they could make it kind of their own service. If I remember correctly, in some of the conversations I had in the past with them, something along the lines of, so-and-so networking powered by Cato, or some sort of a, compromise around that. It comes down to the traditional, sales methodology at that point in time and what the channel program is going to offer to partners. Of course, the easy way in is kind of that agent model, but as you pointed out, that might not be a desirable way to go because, agents come and go like the wind or the whims of a vendor.
Right. It's like walking down the street and you see your insurance agent. He's there for about 20 years and then one day just disappears. And no one knows whatever happened.
Yep.
All right. Elsewhere in the land of IT, VMware bought a little outfit called Blue Medora. They are a integration arm for collecting data from different monitoring tools and aggregating that in an interesting way. And VMware is talking about using that data and injecting it into this Project Magna initiative, which is essentially an AI ops project where they're going to collect data from everything and use that to automate all kinds of fun things. I know that you've been somewhat skeptical of all things IT automation, to say the least, but I wonder, what's your take on this project that VMware is up to, and what do you think of this deal?
I think it's interesting, and I think it would be a good way to, bring all this data into a single place for analysis and be able to, unify a lot of the data gathering, reporting, and then use that to drive automated systems. But I think there's even another angle here, and I think that comes from the security end of things, because the more data that you can feed into a security platform that uses automation, the more secure that you can become. And I know VMware has been looking around at other acquisitions too. I mean, there's rumors that they were even looking to acquire a company called BitGlass, which is a company that basically does secure SD-WAN when it comes down to it, with a lot of other security layers involved. So, I mean, if that's kind of the goal that's going on there, it makes even more sense. But, truth be told, when it comes down to the complexity that we're starting to encounter with dealing with, everything from containers to virtualization to virtualized networking to virtualized data centers, the list goes on. You're going to need more and more actionable data to be able to drive these automated systems. The complexity is reaching the point that network managers and folks like that cannot be successful in these areas unless they have intelligent tools that do some of the heavy lifting for them.
Yeah, things are getting more complex all the time, and it's beyond the capabilities themselves. The problem is, you're dependent on the quality of the data, because that really trains the AI model. So it's awesome that you may have tons of data, but it might be the wrong data. And then you wind up this situation where, the AI model makes the wrong call. And as one wise man once said, it's one thing to be wrong. It's quite another thing to be wrong at scale, right?
Very true.
All right, well, we'll see what happens. In fact, we're not even sure who's going to own VMware at the moment, but we'll see what's going on with that and what they wind up buying, and it'll be interesting times for sure. Finally, had a chat with the folks over at Dell, and we were just going over their financials and how the channel contributed to that factor. And if you take apart their latest quarter, they were talking about how the client side grew 2%, and most of that was driven by commercial mobile computing devices. The data center side of the business, in terms of storage and servers, took a bit of a beating. And that was even before the epidemic was in full swing. So we don't know what the next set of numbers are, but it's probably going to be a little more of the same. I'm wondering, did mobile computing not get enough credit for saving the channel? Because it seems like a lot of the things that we did make money on were driven by working from home, people buying new PCs. They were hard to find. And then you got all the networking stuff and the cloud stuff that goes with that. And is that sustainable, or is that going to be a spike? And then now everybody's got their devices, and now everybody's kind of moved up to the cloud. And will that start to see a decline in revenues for everybody? What do you think?
It's real hard to predict because of, the COVID-19 situation. They're talking about, opening things up and people returning to offices. And then on, the other hand, they're talking about, we're going to be getting a spike, or we're going to be getting a second wave. So I think there is so much uncertainty around this that it's hard to come up with a prediction of where it will go. Now, from my point of view of what I've seen is that, there was a lot of buying going on for mobile devices, notebooks, tablets, things like that. And also all the other accessories that enable work from home, whether it's, the laptop add-on video cameras and microphones to, power Zoom meetings, or, even printers at home, or things like that. So there was a surge in certain types of hardware that was definitely led by the whole, shutdown, work from home, rethink business elements that have been going on out there. So it's difficult to kind of come to a conclusion if that's going to remain or if businesses are going to start bringing people back in. Now, if businesses start bringing people back in, this whole work from home thing might wind up being just a flash in the pan. On the flip side, a lot of businesses have seen increased productivity from the work from home thing, so they might invest further in it. Either way you look at it, you're going to need more cloud services and you're going to need to expand data centers when it comes down to it. So I think the potential growth is going to be back in, the cloud and the data center to support that.
We'll see. I think a lot of people are getting comfortable working from home, especially IT folks who tend to be a little not the most sociable people in the world. So as one guy once said to me, he said, in some ways, I've been training for this my whole life.
Yeah, that's very true. And also, but you look at it from the point of view, these IT folks that are working from home are going to need more power available to them to enable other folks to be able to work from home. And that might mean, more cloud services or managing more cloud services or deploying more hybrid cloud services, which puts us back into the realm of the data center.
All right. Well, it's been about 10 years since I worked in an office, so this whole working from home thing works for me just fine. And you may ask me to work in an office someday, but I'm just telling you, it's not likely you'll be able to afford it. All right, Frank, as always, good to see you.
Same here, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
I got the burgers. I went to Bun Barn, Beef Patty Palace, Tomato Town.
Oh, thanks for getting all this, honey.
No problem. Getting all of it just took about 2 hours.
I just wish there was an easier way to get all your burger fixings from one place,
Well.
Dad, you didn't go to Mayo King?
Our car doesn't fit in their drive-thru. I went to Mustard Chef.
I hate this burger.
He also went to ketchup.
When you're building something using components that don't work together easily, things could get ugly, fast. You wouldn't live like this, so don't make your DevOps team live like this.
This lack of burger cohesion is hard on all of us, Cheryl.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle.
Hey, Mike and Frank, thanks so much for a great channel roundup today. Folks, that's it. That's it for today's show for Thursday, July 9th. Hope you've enjoyed our TechStrong TV. Just a reminder, we will be playing a repeat of one of our previous shows for tomorrow, Friday the 10th. And we'll be back Monday with lots of great new fresh content, news, and more. So check us out then. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel. Stay well, stay safe, stay strong, TechStrong. We're out.